Oh, were they? Okay. And I can't imagine like being them in the car knowing you survived. Or like you have survival guilt to begin with, but when you're 9-year-old, I'm sure that survival guilt. Yeah, yeah. I saw her obituary in the paper today. I was like, oh, you know.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Noon,
Here.
Counselor Galanese,
Here.
Counselor Burrow,
Here.
Counselor Peeler,
Here.
Counselor Regan,
Here.
Counselor Camera,
Here.
Counselor Salamandra,
Here.
Counselor Brim,
Here.
Mayor Valentino.
Here. Next on our agenda is a DRI update by our city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor and City Councilors, and good evening. Work completed to date. There has been no significant progress on the project to report. Pay application 16 was processed on 2/9/23, bringing the total contract completed work paid to date to $9,235,503. Weather pending, we are looking forward to an April or May startup for all remaining contract and punch list items.
Thank you. Next is the Foundry update by our city clerk.
Remedial design plans are in progress for 19 remaining properties located south of St. Peter's Church along Genesee, Geneva, and Tillman Streets. Meetings are being held this month with homeowners of properties along the south side of Tillman Street and east side of Geneva Street, south of Tillman Street to review plans. No further action letters were issued to the owners of properties fully remediated in 2022. For remedial construction, excavation, and restoration of 60 Middle Street, which has been used as a project staging area, was completed. Minor surface restoration work remains. Per an agreement with the city, the contractor set up a staging area at 42 Geneva Street for clean materials and equipment to be used during the 2023. Restoration details will be finalized with the Director of Public Works later in the year. Excavation of 6 properties located along the west side of Genesee Street, just south of Lewis Street, is expected to begin in March, weather permitting. Restoration activities at Genesee Park, including masonry activities and landscaping, are expected to resume in late March or April, pending the weather, and are expected to be completed in late spring. Remediation of all remaining residential properties is expected to be performed in 2023. Remediation of the State Street staging area located on the parcel just east of the railroad is anticipated to be completed in 2024. Demobilization from the additional project staging area on Lehigh Street will also be completed in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is consideration of meeting minutes, and we'll take February 1st. I need a motion for February 1st. Counselor Galanese, seconded by Counselor Regan. Clerk, please call the roll on the meeting minutes.
Counselor Galanese,
Aye.
Counselor Burrow,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
Counselor Noon,
Aye.
Mayor Valentino.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Next is our February 15th meeting minutes. I need a motion. Counselor Galanese, second by Counselor Brim. Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Galanese,
Aye.
Counselor Burrow,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Abstain.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
Counselor Noon,
Abstain.
Mayor Valentino.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Next is public comment, and we have one person signed up, Pat Schiller. Welcome, Pat. Good evening.
Much has been said about Geneva being a destination for tourists. Ideally, someone will decide to stay and relocate here. We will have an influx of new residents when construction is completed at the former American Legion property. It is important that we work together to make Geneva the best it can be. You have been elected to lead us in that. You are the rim of the coin that must bring us together. Last night, after being out for the evening, I came home high. Not from drinking, didn't have a drop, but from listening to someone extolling the virtues of Geneva in the Finger Lakes area. Evan Dawson spoke to an attentive audience about Geneva and its many attributes. He did mention wines of the area also, but much of what he said was about Geneva. I wish you could have been there. You would have been pleased. Amy is here with enthusiasm, knowledge, and energy. Please support her and your constituents by working together for Geneva. Civility, respect, compromise is needed. Egos put aside. Seeing life from another's point of view perspective is important. I know you can do it. Be the positive you want to see in others. But totally, Evan was phenomenal in his praise of Geneva, especially London Street, but in all of Geneva. And we have to work together to do this. And thanks to Jan for inviting him.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is the city manager report.
Okay, so I'll begin with some city recruitment updates. The director of the Planning and Economic Development Department, this is a recruitment that was paused. We are currently in the process of drafting a new recruitment materials for this position. We had two teams that looked at this previously, an internal and an external team. They came together and will be working with some of the ideas that they shared, looking at that director as a connector, as a business developer, as someone that really can bring what Geneva is out to other communities. And so we'll be moving forward with that in the next month. Another position is our chief of police. The exam will be held on March 25th. Everyone had to apply last month to take that exam. Once the exam is completed, we will await the results from New York State Civil Service. This typically takes anywhere between 4 and 6 months to receive those results. As we await the results, I'll be working with the police department in an interim capacity if they do not come in before the police chief leaves. I'll be working with them on what that looks like as we move forward. And we'll also begin the process of creating how the interviews will be shaped. There will be an interview panel similar to Planning and Economic Development and others that has community as well as staff that are currently in different positions as stakeholders. Prior to that happening, prior to the panel's full formation, we will also be holding some community discussions to talk about the role and expectations of the chief of police in the city of Geneva. So that will be coming. And a third position, kind of in the leadership team realm, our assessor announced his resignation effective on March 10th. He'll be joining another municipality closer to some family. We are currently working with the city of Canandaigua. That is currently a shared position to look at that and look how we'll be working together on that recruitment. So three large vacancies that I'm already feeling. Two other updates. We do have an RFP out right now, a request for proposal for a MAP grant administrator. So we were awarded the New York State Micro Enterprise Assistance Program funding. We are accepting applications through March 10th for someone to help administer that program. And so we'll be using those program funds to help administer it. A second request for proposal that will soon be out. As part of the budget process, we were looking to retain support from outside, as well as our own team, to review the infrastructure of the lakefront as well as Bicentennial Park, looking at solutions for event management and in the farmers market. The request for proposal is being completed right now. I hope to have that draft finalized this week and it will be out to the community very soon. We'll be looking for an organization to really look at what we offer at the current lakefront, all of the amenities that are currently there, how we have configured that, and talk about how the events and activities can continue to work together there. Because right now we have a lot of events. And so how do we move those things together and include the farmers market? We've also included looking at Bicentennial Park, as was discussed in our conversations during budget. So both of those RFPs, one is currently out, the map is out due March 10th, the other will soon be coming. And from there, we'll be able to bring forward for consideration, how do we do this and make sure we have the infrastructure at the lakefront for the events and other things. And then the final piece is Shade Tree Committee. So as far as committee appointments go, Shade Tree Committee appointments, I learned after our last meeting, is actually an appointment of the city manager. And so you did vote to appoint James Norwalk, so I just wanted to make sure. We also have two other members, Charles Rouse and Jeremy Bush, who will continue on that committee. So I wanted to make sure you are aware of that.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question? Yeah, this is just something I've wondered about when we talked about the police chief search. I'm just curious where the test weight, is that like weight? I mean, is it weighted or do you consider all factors? Is it like your SATs or, and if they're more well-rounded or whatever? I mean, how do you eliminate people if they just haven't done very well on that test?
Yes.
Or
So how civil service test works, it's called the band of three. And so whoever scores the top number, the three top scores are who we can review from that test.
Oh, okay.
And so, and it's a banding scoring system. So if I have, and anyone that's a civil service expert will probably let me know if I have this incorrect. But if I have 5 applicants that all score 90, they are considered in that top 3 because all 5 have the same score. If I only have 1 applicant that scores 90, and then I have an 85, and then I have 2 75s, I'm consider all 4 of those because under the band, they're reachable. What I will say though, is Ontario County will handle all of that and I will only see who is actually reachable.
Oh,
And so they'll ensure that happens before. So the test does determine who even can sit for an interview and move forward.
Thank you. I was just curious about that. Thank you.
Great. So we're moving on to unfinished business, and the first 3 items are going to be focused on the staggered terms. The first 2 are procedural. We had to move this to this March meeting because we had to do a seeker. So the first is a resolution classifying local law number 1-2023, staggering terms of office of the Geneva City Councils and Mayors as an unlisted action under seeker and authorizing the Geneva City Council as lead agency, presented by our city manager.
Okay, so as the mayor said, this is procedural. A seeker was included in the agenda tonight. It notes that this item is classified as an unlisted action pursuant to the process. This would allow the city council to consent to act as a lead agency per the regulations. So you would act, and then it was determined in that seeker that no coordinated review with other potentially involved agencies is applicable to this.
I need a motion. Counselor Noon, seconded by Counselor Galanese. Any discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Noon, Counselor Galanese,
Aye.
Counselor Burrow,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
Mayor Valentino,
Aye.
motion carried.
Next is a resolution declaring that the local law amending the Geneva City Charter to stagger terms of the office of the Geneva City Councils and Mayors and unlisted action under seeker will not result in any adverse environmental impact. City manager?
And this is just what you voted on. So you voted to allow yourself to consent to be the lead agency. Now you're voting to approve that you have determined that there is no adverse environmental impact by doing this.
Motion by Counselor Galanese, second by Counselor Regan. Discussion. I would hope it wouldn't create an environmental impact. There might be some hot air involved. Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Galanese,
Aye.
Counselor Burrow.
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
Counselor Noon, Mayor Valentino,
Aye.
motion carried.
Next is the actual local law, staggering terms of the office of the Geneva City Councils and Mayors, presented by our city manager.
So this is the actual local law that was discussed at the previous public hearing. If approved, the proposition of staggering council terms would be placed on the ballot in the November 2023 general election. If the body of the city approves that by a majority, then the staggered terms as presented in this local law would take effect in January 2024.
Need a motion? Counselor Galanese, second by Counselor Noon. Any discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Galanese,
Aye.
Counselor Burrow,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
Counselor Noon, Mayor Valentino.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Next is a second reading of an ordinance amending chapter 335-17 entitled Vehicles and Traffic Safety for the Pulteney and Washington, presented by our city manager.
So this came before you at the last meeting. It requires a 50-foot setback from Washington Street on Pulteney Street, safely allowing for multiple vehicle parking spaces to remain at this location. And it removes the unsafe site distance situation that is currently happening there.
Need a motion? Counselor Kramer, seconded by Counselor Galanese. Discussion. Counselor Galanese.
I just want to thank our city manager and DPW, Joe Venuti, for acting on this so quickly.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
Counselor Noon, Counselor Galanese,
Aye.
Counselor Burrow.
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Mayor Valentino.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Next is a second reading of an ordinance amending chapter 335-17 entitled Vehicles and Traffic Safety for South Main and J Street, presented by our city manager.
So this would reduce the current parking of 260 feet near 772 South Main Street to 190-foot setback from J Street. Again, this would allow for multiple vehicle parking spaces at this location and allows a 190-foot site distance to the north.
Need a motion? Counselor Noon, seconded by Counselor Brim. Any discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Noon, Counselor Galanese,
Aye.
Counselor Burrow,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
Mayor Valentino.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Next is a second reading of an ordinance amending chapter 335-9 entitled Stop Intersections on William and West, presented by our city manager.
Okay, another ordinance change. This would allow West Street school pedestrian and vehicle traffic to safely cross. It would address the safety crossing concerns at that intersection of William Street at West Street. There's currently only a stop sign for traffic on West Street. Director of Public Work recommends that the stop signs be installed on William Street at West Street to safely control that vehicle traffic at the intersection.
Motion by Counselor Galanese, seconded by Counselor Regan. Any discussion? Counselor Galanese.
I really want to thank you on this one. This was long overdue. There's an accident waiting to happen there by a child getting hit by a car. There's an influx between Washington and William of kids, and this was well needed, and thank you.
I'd like to echo that. I mean, this is, it's helping the crossing guards too. I mean, so this is a protection feature for all involved in that intersection. So thank you.
I tertiarily want to thank you. Thank you.
I'll join in
It's
on that. as well.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's
And-
great.
I'll pass that all along on to DPW and the staff. I will say you will likely be seeing additional ordinances coming through as they continue to look at a lot of these things.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Galanese,
Aye.
Counselor Burrow.
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
Counselor Noon, Mayor Valentino.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Next is a resolution requiring residency of no more than 30 miles for police chief and fire chiefs, presented by our city manager.
Right. So this resolution will remove Resolution 43, 2009, requiring the police and fire chief to reside in the city of Geneva. The 30-mile radius was based on the council's discussion at the February 15th. What I did provide in my briefing that went with this resolution is a picture depiction of 10 miles, 15 miles, 20, 25, and 30-mile radius so that city council could determine. I had proposed the largest, but you could have a further discussion on that. And so that is what is presented here, is to amend it so that the residency would be of no more than 30 miles. So they have to live within that radius.
I need a motion. Counselor Galanese, seconded by Counselor Noon. Discussion. I see hands up all over. So I'm gonna I'll start with Counselor Regan.
Oh, geez, I think
And
my
I-
hand went up last, but, yeah, I've heard from a lot of people on this one and, I myself was a little bit torn and I do feel it's pretty difficult. I mean, I think the ideal thing is having, the police chief and the fire chief live in town just for the sense of community. If not, their access to an emergency. I mean, I don't know if we're ready to do amendments now, but I'm going to go back to what I said. They got no traction last time and try it again. Because I got calls from people who actually like the idea of instead of giving it a mileage, give it a within the school district. In my mind, what that does is it makes it's a little bit of a compromise. It makes them all quote unquote Genevans in that, their children would be at that school if their children are of school age. You'd see those people around. I don't know. I think it gives you a little bit more flexibility. I definitely understand that the townspeople are not paying the taxes, and it could well be that someone ends up living in the town and does not pay taxes that supports that person's salary. And that's too bad. I do like the incentives ideas of having someone in the town, but I don't, do I put an amendment forward with that or
Yes,
do we
yes,
wait for?
yes, you
discussion?
can. Yeah.
Okay, I would like to make an amendment to this that instead of what has been read, the resolution say now in the now therefore part. Now therefore be it resolved that the Geneva City Council duly assembled and authorized does hereby set forth that the fire chief and the police chief for the city of Geneva will be required to establish residency within the boundaries that encompass the Geneva School District within 90 days of appointment, replacing Resolution 43, 2009.
Do we have a second? Second by Counselor Cameron. Yeah, discussion on, well, the discussion will be on the amendment, please.
Yeah.
Yep. Great, perfect.
I heard from the constituents, more than I thought I would, but I did, and people made points both ways. To people that are comfortable, they feel good about having the officers in our community being near us and everything else, I'm not going to go through all the reasons. There's just different ways of looking at it, and then others that were. And probably myself as well was just feeling that by expanding the radius, we assure that we're going to get the largest pool of applicants possible, and hopefully then the most, more qualified people to do this job. So it was a combination of how you straddle these two things, and the 30 seems a little far for me. And when I look at that, there's you would sit down here and live next to a winery down on the south end of Seneca Lake, and you just don't really feel like Geneva, and it's not the same experience living there. So the thing about the school district thing that's very tempting is the other thing is we have another entity or another municipality that's in our school district, and that's the Waterloo side.
Right.
So I mean, what's the thought of counselors and yourself about if you lived in the whatever that is, the part of the Waterloo that go to our school, be included in, let's say, the quote unquote school district thing?
Yeah, it's not a perfect thing. Is
Okay.
my only response. I mean, I think at least, because I think Phelps, you might get some people who live in Phelps, Romulus, who would, I'm not sure
Yeah, so
exactly.
it gets
But
fuzzy
it
and
gets
not
everybody
more difficult to-
in a closer range, and that they are united in the fact that, they're in the school district, they're Genevans, they're Panthers, or,
right, and there's
whatever.
enough options in the
Yeah,
town,
and so I just, it's just a thought. I mean, I think it keeps them closer and keeps them more in the
Okay.
quote unquote Geneva terminology.
I'm not offering an amendment to the amendment.
Okay. More discussion on the amendment. Counselor Galanese?
I'm against this amendment for the simple fact we're handcuffing a situation that we're trying to alleviate to create more activity at the hirings. The, what do I want to say? The hiring shortage that we have, and it's a national issue, and the national issue says that we need to lift it. Doesn't say keep restricting it one way or another. And as Ken brought up the point of Waterloo, you can bring up the point of we've had superintendents that live here, acquire residency, but their children do not come to school here. So until the school works with us, I don't think that we should be working with the school, as much as I would like to not say that. But half the teachers that work at our school don't live in Geneva. They could care less about our community. And there's police officers, if you listen to what they have to say, there's a problem internally that this needs to be lifted, because you have somebody who might be living in, I don't know, right at the borderline of Mid Lake School. That's closer. So putting that restriction on, I'm not for it. I think that if we're going to lift it, we lift it. We play a restriction with mileage, and that'll be it. And I don't think that 30 miles is that big of a deal. You can get here within a half an hour. We have Officer Arroyo, who's at every single event that happens in Geneva, and there's a lot of police officers, Officer Van Savage. I can go on the list that don't live in Geneva, but they could participate in everything in Geneva. So I say we don't put the restrictions on as much as we can't nitpick this thing. We put it in Amy's lap. She wrote the resolution as 30 miles. I think that we stick with that.
Counselor Peeler,
Yeah,
and then Counselor Solomon.
real quick, just for the record, I want to point out that Frank Galanese talked about handcuffs. Did a dad joke for a police discussion. Way to dad joke that. Jan, I 100% agree with your ideology and your aspirations to have our police chief live in our community, and I agree. But I don't support the amendment because I believe it puts us in a pickle that I will discuss later. And if it passes or fails, and I'll move back to the other side of the discussion, and I'll share that with you later.
Counselor Salamandra.
I don't think we should lift the residency requirement for a number of reasons that I'll get to, but for this amendment, I'm going to vote yes because Geneva School District is closer than 30 miles, and I don't believe that police chiefs should live away from the community they police.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Counselor Burrow?
It's hard to really tell if we're talking about the amendment or the original
Well, we should
resolution.
be talking about the amendment.
All right, I'll keep it at that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. No comment on it.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? Clerk, please call the roll on the,
You don't really mean though the teachers. You don't really mean that there are a lot of teachers that don't care about this, don't care about Geneva.
that's an opinion. So let's.
It
keep
was a
moving.
blanket
Clerk,
statement.
I want to
Not
move on
so
to the vote.
heavy.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Whatever. I
Counselor
said it.
Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Brim,
Nay.
Counselor Noon, Counselor Galanese,
Nay.
Counselor Burrow,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Nay.
Mayor Valentino.
Nay.
Motion defeated.
Okay, now we're back to the original resolution, and I imagine there's plenty of people. Counselor Salamandra?
Okay, am I called on or in stack?
Yes, yep. It's your
Okay.
turn.
Okay, what does it say about a public servant who doesn't want to reside with the public? Who doesn't want to live in the community that they serve? I don't believe that a police chief is qualified to police in Geneva if he doesn't want to live here and be responsible to the tax burden and to his neighbors. This department claims to aim towards a community policing model. And as Counselor Galanese said, the list is very, very long of officers who do not live in the city. And I don't think that they should be led by someone who doesn't live in the city, because then it feels like, to some of us, an occupying force. I believe that police chiefs should be responsible for their budget, because when we ask ourselves, Why wouldn't somebody want to live in the city of Geneva? One of the answers is that the town is more attractive. Well, why is that? Because they don't have to pay for the police department. And so I can't make sense of a world where an employee would get to write a budget that they then don't contribute to and aren't responsible for. And so I think that and the other reasons are because our housing stock is bad. And I've been trying to say that, but there's no money to fix it. And I can point to that police budget again for that. And so I think rather than change the rules for police, like usual, we should make police be accountable to the rules and move to the city. And if we can't find a chief of police that wants to live here, we should name a temporary chief until we can.
Council Peeler?
Thank you. This is a question for Amy. Amy, I recall us talking in the last meeting about how lifting this requirement would potentially send the right message to the right pool of applicants. Since the last meeting, without violating confidentiality, has the pool of applicants been greater than anticipated, or was it positive based on our last discussion?
So I can only speak broadly.
Yeah.
I had multiple applicants that do not currently have city residency who are watching to see what we were going to determine and probably are watching this again. And I will say from those that I've talked to, they have decided whether or not to apply. A majority have applied.
Okay.
I don't know who all has applied for the test. I don't have that information. I can just tell you the few that have reached out to me that have chosen to. So I don't know how big our pool is. There's been about a few who have reached out.
So out of range, out of city applicants have come in.
They have applied.
They've applied.
They've applied to take the test.
Right.
They have not yet sat for the test or fully gone through the process.
That's for all of them that have applied.
Yep,
That's true for all of
exactly.
them, right?
Exactly.
All right.
That was over to.
So,
Order. Council
so
Peeler has the floor.
what's the value then in voting for this before we have applicants before us that would demand it? Because I recall the discussion being that we can willfully make this decision at any time to lift the requirement for the right candidate. And so what's the value in voting for it now, other than further doubling down on our commitment for the right candidate, which we can't acknowledge that we know who that is.
Yeah. So I think just my first thought on this would be your candidates have not yet taken the test or gone through the next step of the process. I don't know if everyone would be willing, if you repeal this and stay with the current, I don't know if everyone would be willing to go ahead and take the test or not. I don't know what your pool will look like. That's why we wanted to do it prior. So when we posted the position, we could say about flexibility with it. The other piece to this too, that I did take input into the resolution was the ability to provide some kind of incentive if someone were to choose to live within the city.
Oh, we can raise hands. Council Burrow's been waiting to talk. Council Burrow?
I have other issues with the resolution, but I really don't want to get into all the wording of the resolution, but I want to talk about looking at this from a different angle. This is about changing the line in the sand. Lines in the sand are determined by bodies of water, are determined by mountain ranges, and are also arbitrary. Okay. So what if we have a preferred line in the sand the way it currently is? However, when it comes down to interviewing for these two positions, those that are residents of the city of Geneva will be rated in a different way. So then, if you live on the west side of Slauson Lane, okay, and you have all the qualifications and meet the panel's desire that is doing the hiring, they don't have to pick up stakes and move to the east side of the road. So instead of changing the line in the sand based on all the variables that have been mentioned at this meeting and the last meeting, the line in the sand is always going to be subject to, but I only live 0.2 of a mile beyond the radius, but I only live just outside of the school district. Okay, but I have a secondary residence here and I'm here for X number of months, but of course that's unmonitored. All right, so I don't like the resolution. It's impossible for me to vote for this. And I would just like to look at it from a different angle based on the example that I just given you. But I don't want my police chief or my fire chief living in Fairport or Weedsport or Naples. That just doesn't make sense to me. You can try to talk sense into me and I will take that, but that does not make sense to me for someone who is so valuable to a community of, regardless of the population, as your chief of police or your fire chief. These are hugely important positions that demand relationships with the people that live here. And as was mentioned by another counselor tonight, you're also the business manager of that department. And you don't have a financial stake in the game. That makes no sense to me. So I really don't want to make any of the amendments that I would like to make to this because I think that we need to look at it from a different angle. And that's the angle that I just laid out. From a hiring standpoint, you have to tell me how to do that.
Yep, sure.
So just to address how this was created, it was based off the conversation here, where originally I had given you the 15-mile radius, and in our conversations, we went to 60 miles to eliminating the radius to school district radius, to conversations about why school district may not be the best because of a variety of factors. That's why I also gave you the radius map with multiple radiuses on it. 30 is halfway between the 60-mile radius and the no radius, and that's where that came from. The other conversation was talking about incentivizing and looking at, if someone lived in the city, is there a benefit beyond the benefits of living in the city that could be provided? That's where this resolution came from. It also came from the fact that many other municipalities do something similar, or they do nothing at all. They have opened it up. So I use that information to craft this based on your conversations. I am not tied to any of these conversations, but I will help carry it out. And back to kind of Councilor Taylor's comment, I think that for someone searching for a job, they need to know clearly what the rules are. If they don't know what the rules are, we can't have those expectations of them once they step into the job. And if they don't know that it's a fair playing field, where right now we're saying, maybe you could live outside the city, but maybe not. Maybe you could live on this road, but not this road. And then they apply for the job. And they're our top candidate. And they say, well, I'm not willing to move from this road to this road because you said maybe I could. I don't want to go into that. And so that's really why I'm looking for council to set that clear determination. You created the resolution in 2009 based on speed to get to the department, is basically what that 2009 resolution said, which is a lot of the language that I have pulled for this resolution. And we've moved on to leadership beyond just having access there, to looking for those qualities wherever they may lie.
Councilor Galanese.
So I just want to say that, again, We have department heads. We have people who work in the departments that each one of us can reach out to and talk to. You don't know the magnitude of how important this is to our police department. Number one, we would love to keep on hiring and promoting within, but not even can we do that with people who have been a police officer in our department for years. They have a family that they have to uproot to apply for the police chief position. That's not fair. We talk about community building. If we were so hell-bent on our community being broadened and strengthened and embodied to the city of Geneva as we want it to be in a perfect world, we would require every single teacher to live here. I guarantee you that 75% of the teachers in that school or any of the schools in Geneva do not live here. Their children don't go to school here. So that statement doesn't make me feel like, oh geez, we're making the wrong thing. We're making a wrong mistake by saying what I'm saying. Second of all, just because you live here doesn't mean that you have to spend your money here. You have to go out here. You have to do any of those things. This is America. You have freedom. We are creating a wall around something that is in the long run hurting us. We open it up. You have a more successful rate to succeed in the process of building a city to where we want it to be. So yes, the line in the sand needs to be moved. It's been there for years and years and years. This isn't the first conversation that this has been an issue. It's been with Chief Trickler, Chief Pasalaka. We can keep going on and on because I'm sure it's always been an issue. And yes, it might be nitpicking the town of Geneva to the city of Geneva, but I can go on and say, the police chief of Seneca Falls doesn't live in Seneca Falls. The police chief in Penny Ann doesn't live in Penny Ann. The police chief in Canandaigua doesn't live in Canandaigua. So why do we always, when everyone else is progressing as a city, we want to keep on doing the same thing that doesn't work, that creates problems? This should be simple. Everyone who wants to become police chief within a certain amount of miles, apply. Have enthusiasm. Have our department have something to want to be able to say, I want to keep growing in this department. I want to do better. I want to climb the ladder of success. And not be like, well, I would love to apply for it, but the next city council could change it back to the way it was. And then I'm in the city and they want a town police chief. I mean, we need to stop this. We need to start looking towards the future and going by what is the trend now. Ken, like I said, last council meeting, he blew me out of the water what he said. And I commend him for that because that was against what you normally, I feel like you would do. And then after, the other thing is you had another counselor who was a hypocrite because weeks before that we're basically saying, no,
Yeah, let's not.
well, I will go there because it's the truth and the fact. And if you have a point to make on the resolution, please make that point.
I made my point all the way around, Mayor. Thank you.
You all set? Councilor Peel, I see your hand up, but I want to make sure other people
Thank
have
you.
the opportunity to say something if they want. Councilor Newton.
I am in favor of this. I think I like the incentive idea that Amy has mentioned and trying to get people to come and live here that apply for the chief of fire or police. I definitely do think the ideal situation is obviously having both individuals live here in our city. That's in a perfect world. Given the current hiring climate, I think the 30-mile radius is very reasonable. I wouldn't be opposed to cutting that down to 20 or 25, but when you look at some of the areas that it encompasses, obviously they have very large populations, which increases our pool of applicants. So I think that's a positive to that. I think the response time is still acceptable within that 30-mile range. Obviously, I do feel that to develop goals and direction for a department, as all department heads are tasked with, they clearly would have to understand the city and the department structure. So when people make the assumption that an individual being hired for these positions wouldn't have any accountability, they don't care about the city because they don't live here. I think that's just total ignorance, including no financial stake. That's also a false assumption and ignorant as well, given the fact that, again, the same budgetary processes and procedures are still in place. So they're going to still have to answer to city council. They're still going to have to follow the exact same rules and procedures that we have in creating department budgets. And I can't imagine anyone taking a job with the mindset of, I'm going to come in and, I don't live there, so I'm just going to destroy the department. I'm going to try to raise the department funds. So then that means I have to raise taxes on the residents I don't like. I think we're making very false assumptions about the individuals who we might get in these positions. And obviously we're looking for the most qualified and the person who truly wants to be here. And clearly, if they're applying here, you want to make a difference in that community that you apply. So I can't imagine anything different from that. And the responsibility of their job would not diminish. And I also feel like just because you don't live here, the responsibility to residents also wouldn't diminish. So I really think some of us are really just jumping the gun and just assuming that we're just going to get, the worst possible candidate in here just because they don't live from the city, that they're not going to care about any of us. And I can't imagine that being the same, because I can tell you right now, down in Seneca Falls, the former police chief, Stu Peenstra, amazing individual, highly regarded in the community, although living in Cayuga County. And he was at almost every single Seneca Falls event over his tenure, both as a police officer and as a chief. And I know that for a fact because I grew up there and lived there. And I have many ties to that community in department individuals. And he cared for that town just as much as if someone lived there. So I just think some of us just need to, we're making a lot of false assumptions with this. So I hope we move this forward. I hope we get great pool of candidates and hope that they're closer to Geneva.
Counselor Salamander, I do see your hand up. I just want to make sure everybody else gets a chance. No, Counselor Peeler is going to be the second round, and Counselor Salamander can have her second round. If you haven't had a first round, I'm asking you, would you like a first round? Okay.
And you're not in your mic.
I apologize. I'm convinced by some of the arguments that both Councilor Noon and Galanese raised that we need to move the lines a little bit past the school district, and I think I'm comfortable with 20 miles. I'm not so sure about 30 miles, and I'm trying to sort that out in my head, but 20 miles feels better to me.
From this conversation, you're going to have a little time to think about that. Counselor Brim.
So I definitely love the idea of incentivizing it. Having kind of looked at this map that we have here in front of us, 20 miles or 30 miles, depending on where you're looking, it really isn't going to make that much of a difference time-wise. Most of them have very direct routes here. I can still get to Pittsburgh in 45 minutes, or if I'm looking at Aurora down in Cayuga County, it's still 45 minutes. One is barely outside of 15 miles, the other's right at the 30-mile line. I mean, we definitely don't want to handcuff ourselves with our recruiting pool. And I think 30 is definitely going to be acceptable with the time frame that's there. Most of these have very direct routes to Geneva.
Before I go to round two, I got to put my 2 cents in. So, you mentioned something about future council can change this. Well, our next thing on the agenda is an ordinance discussion about an ordinance of residency. So, embedding this option into an ordinance would give it a little more teeth. So if you wanted to try to make it a little more lasting, that would be an option because it would take 2 readings. The other thing that I have is this is just a reminder, this is a city manager hire position. So I would like to make a amendment in the now therefore be it resolved paragraph. And I'm not sure if I can get this perfect, but I'm going to try to get it as right as I can. Now therefore be it resolved that the Geneva City Council duly assembled and authorized does hereby have a preference for the fire chief and the police chief to live within the city of Geneva, period. The Geneva City Council also gives the city manager the latitude to lift that requirement based on applicants and candidates that apply. Replacing resolution 43-2009, and I so move.
Second.
I got a second by Counselor Regan. Discussion. So basically what I'm saying is, the city council prefers the city chief, the chiefs, both departments, to live within the city of Geneva, but gives the latitude to the city manager to lift that, it's not a requirement, but to lift that residency preference and allow them to live within whatever radius the city manager, whether it's Amy or a future city manager, based on the applicant pool. That's what I'm saying.
Was there a second on that?
Yes, there was a second. Discussion. Counselor Galanese, then Counselor Regan, then Counselor Peeler.
So I still feel with how that's written, how would you post that and make people say, I feel comfortable.
Yep.
I'm not wasting my time.
Good question.
Yes. So this is done in other municipalities, where, so in a county, a lot of your department heads are public officers, and under public officer law, they have to live within the county limits. However, the county administrator or executive can waive that based on the applicants. It's a common practice. I've seen it before where it's as authorized by them. So it's a waiver process, basically, is what you would be granting. So the applicants know that there is a preference given to candidates that live within the city, or preference of the council is for candidates to live in the city. However, the city manager is authorized to allow candidates to not live within the city. And that's, I mean, it is that kind of gray lines. They have to assume that the city manager is okay with the flexibility. I would say how we would do that going forward would always be to recruit with that flexibility understanding. So it's very clear to the candidate, we prefer you live in the city, but the city manager has the authorization. You could formalize that tighter if you wanted, saying, if you wanted to choose a radius or something like that, the city manager has the ability to authorize up to 30 miles or you could leave it blanketed.
Counselor Regan.
I can appreciate your question, Frank. I mean, I think people do want to know, but I mean, the way I look at it is if they're a strong candidate and they really want it, I feel like they would go for it. I mean, I know I would. I mean, what would hold you back if you feel like you're going to be the top candidate or in the top, and you live in the town or you live in Canandaigua and you come in as a star. I mean, I think you could, feel that, I mean, either way, we're going to want the top candidate. And if the top candidate is someone who lives outside, the city manager therefore has the right to just say, yeah, I think it's worth giving this privilege to this person because we really want him or her to be in this position. And I think it's a good, it's kind of a compromise, but it's a good one. And I would support it.
Counselor Peeler.
I applaud you for trying to compromise on this, okay? But here's my issue, because for this amendment, we're dissolving the council's authority and placing it in placing it in the hands of the city manager to make that unilateral decision. And then secondly, the language doesn't, because Frank, I 100% agree. I don't want to separate a family when they got a school, they're already in a school system, right? And I want qualified candidates, but where they currently live shouldn't have to be a check against them. But that's not the language of this. It says they have to establish residency within 30 miles. We could have a person from Buffalo applying and then they go move to Sodus. I don't want to incentivize people to stay away from Geneva. And how many people do you talk to? And I talk to a lot of real estate agents. How many people talk to you that say they want to stay away from Geneva, not because of our city, not even because of our taxes. The number one thing that real estate agents tell me is they don't want to put their kids in our school system. So this doesn't do what you want it to do because of that word establish. Now, if it said currently living or currently residing, that'd be a big difference. Tom said it was
We're talking about the amendment. You're going backwards to the original resolution.
But are we giving the authority to the city manager to give candidates the allowance or to establish
to
residency,
waive-
or if they currently don't live in the region.
We're giving the city manager the ability to waive residency within the city limits. That was
In-
my,
in a
that was
30
my
mile-
amendment.
That's just in the city limits.
No, I didn't say up to.
And he
30
didn't say
miles.
that. That's what I want to be clear what we're
Listen.
doing.
We hire the city manager. If for some reason this council or another council feels the city manager did not make a good decision, that's our employee. We work with that employee. And if for some reason a future city council, because this is a resolution, wanted to reestablish residency, they could do that. What I'm suggesting is a compromise, because this is a city manager hire.
I get it.
And the city manager runs the city. City council sets policy. You got it. You got it.
All right,
So
thank
I'm-
you. I yield.
So I have a question on what you just
Hold
said.
on. Well, a question? Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So you just stated that the next council to come in here and overrule what we're trying to do.
It's a resolution.
Okay. So let's say that there was a police chief that was just, perfect example is like right now. So elections coming up next year. We're going to be hiring a new police chief. He doesn't live in the city of Geneva. Now, all of a sudden, the next council overturns this, then what?
Counselor, I don't have a crystal ball. In 2009, that city council put this requirement on the existing city manager, and it lasted from 2009 till now. So what we're trying to do is trying to open up the pool of candidates, give more latitude to the city manager to make good decisions as the city manager moves forward, to establish teams and to run the city efficiently. That's really all I'm trying to do. Counselor Cameron, please.
Okay, so I just want to simplify this for myself, maybe for somebody else, and that is that, so we have the choice of creating this a 20 or a 30-mile limit, and the city manager can hire on that basis. And it's established and everybody knows about it, or we can allow city manager to create her limit, under which she needs to possibly address issues with a high-quality candidate. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Those are the two
Correct.
options. So do we want to, so in a sense, it's sort of, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the amendment is the latter.
The amendment is the latter,
Yeah,
the second thing I said. And so we're saying that we want to transfer that discretion to our city manager.
Correct.
And she understands, I think, that
Preference of council.
and it's, yes, but that the council, I don't know, I'm wondering if we still have to make sure that we understand that the council is telling her that it's acceptable to find somebody that's 10 or 20 miles away. Right? She understands that. Is that in your?
There is no distance
there's
within
no
my
distance in-
amendment
Yeah, so she could hire somebody that's 60 miles away.
Yep.
or 200.
Or we can offer.
What would be crazy.
Yeah.
That city manager, and I hate to say
Obviously,
she or
she
anybody,
wouldn't do that.
that city manager has to know that they have to put somebody in a position
Sure.
that's going to be effective in that position.
That's
You got to be realistic about it.
Right.
I guess so. Is anybody else? I mean, I want to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to talk on the amendment. Counselor Brim and then Counselor Galanese.
I mean, I definitely support that. It kind of hits the exact middle. It gives our city manager the discretion that's needed, but it's also not limiting us to the city. It's also giving us the ability, if, the chief of Rochester decided he wanted to come here, it would give him the ability.
So I feel that in a way we're putting, I'm not going to say words in Amy's mouth, in our city manager's mouth, but we gave her direction last time to give something back to us. And if I feel, and I'm not speaking for her, but she's done a good job since she's been here to put out in front of us what she feels would be something that we would all agree upon. And I feel that what she wrote in this resolution is no different this time than any other time. And I like the fact that we are giving our city manager, like Bill said, we do have some power as a city council, and we always are so willing to give it away that I think is the governing body of policies that we should be saying, we would like our city manager to ride under this resolution and say 30 miles, not her discrepancy of 30 miles or within 30 miles. I think that we should, what she wrote is exactly what I think that it should be. That's my
Then
opinion.
that's what you support. Before 2009, there was no requirement.
And it's possible that she may not want that discretion. It might
That's a
improve her.
question you can ask her. She's sitting right here.
Can we ask her?
Yeah, of course.
Because would that discretion be something that you want or not want?
The discretion is fine. I think as long as it's clear to council that if the candidate that is selected does move into the area or lives in the area and it is not within the city, but it is the preferred candidate, that council understands and there's a commitment to that candidate. That would be the only thing, is understanding that what I will be looking for is the candidate that's going to best lead this department, no matter what. And so if that discretion were given to me, I would continue with that. And in the opinion, it would be, how do they attend events? How do they show up? How are they part of the community? That doesn't necessarily mean where their residence is.
Council Burrow, I see you reaching for, there you go. It's all yours.
Thank you. As we heard in the city manager report, Ken, it's not like the discretion is in the power of one person, because remember, there's a panel of people that interview the candidates for these two positions that have bearing. So you can have discretion and also ask for someone else's opinion on what do you think about candidate A and candidate B. So, all I have to say on the mayor's resolution is, amen. Thank you for supporting what I was trying to get at. So, I'm hoping that before we vote on this, we can hear it again.
Okay. I just want to make sure everybody gets a chance
And
to
is it,
speak.
and is it erasing all of these other whereases?
No, I'm leaving all the other whereases. I'm
Okay.
just going after the now therefore be it resolved.
Okay.
Anybody else? So I will clarify. The now therefore be it resolved that the Geneva City Council duly assembled and authorized does hereby set a preference for the fire chief and the police chief to live within the city of Geneva, period. The Geneva City Council also gives the latitude to the city manager to waive the residency right based on the candidate and the candidate selection. Sound about right?
Allowing them to live in a radius of her choosing. You said that.
I'm going to leave that comment off altogether.
Okay, thank you.
Giving the city manager the ability to waive the residency right.
I still have a question though, to the city manager when posting this job. If I live 40 miles away, I'm gonna have to call and say, well, will you take my application? That's why I'm saying we need to put a radius on this. So when it's clear to people who are applying, they know, okay, I live 30 miles. I live 35 miles. I can't apply for this job.
I'm going to call the roll vote on the amendment and whether it passes or fails, you'll have the ability to make changes to that also. Clerk, please call the roll call on the amendment to the current resolution.
Mayor Valentino,
Aye.
Counselor Noon, Counselor Galanese,
Frank, we're going to add that other resolution.
Huh?
We're going to consider
know.
the other resolution
Nay.
about distance. Okay.
Counselor Burrow,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
motion carried.
Now we're back to the resolution as amended. And if there's further discussion there, Counselor Peeler.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the current
Amended.
now therefore be it resolved section that we just amended to include at the end, instead of to include it to the end, because I don't have the resolution written before me, but I would like to include a portion which satisfies Frank's concern, which is clear expectations of the applicants that we give the city manager the ability to lift the residency requirement for candidates that currently live within 30 miles of the city of Geneva. Not that they're allowed to establish residency, but currently live. Because that's exactly what we're talking about. That's what we've been talking about from the
They
beginning.
might be willing to move within the 30-mile circle or 20-mile circle.
But that's not going to be the clear description that
Well, it is.
well, we can second
Because
the
you're saying
amendment,
if
and if
you
it
live-
dies,
if
it
you
dies.
live
So
in
I'm
the
just
city
putting
of
it out there.
Geneva, So just to
You're
clarify,
incentivized in that, so I mean,
you're looking for allowing the city manager to waive for a candidate that lives within 30 miles.
Correct.
Is there a second on that?
repeat that again,
I'm
please.
not sure how, yeah, you gotta say it. Yeah. I agree. Repeat it.
So to allow this, when we give the city manager the authority to lift the residency requirement, it is only for candidates that currently live within 30 miles.
Not currently.
Currently, that is my amendment, currently live. The whole discussion has been about
I
people
second.
who we don't want to uproot, who we don't want to disturb their lives, and who still have an actual connection to our community. But if they live in, Philadelphia,
Right.
and they want to move to Seneca Falls, that's not who we really, but I don't think any of us want that candidate, do we really? We want to incentivize someone to just peace out of the whole city?
Now I understand.
So there's a second by Counselor Salamandra. Now we can move into discussion. Counselor Salamandra?
This is not my comment on the whole thing. I'm in stack for that. But on the amendment, I agree with Counselor Peeler, if you can believe it, that, if someone is within the 30-mile, the only way, I don't want anyone not living in the city, but each thing I'm voting for is bringing more accountability to the rule. If somebody lives outside of 30 miles and wants this job and chooses to relocate, but not in Geneva, then they should not hold the position. So I'm going to vote yes for the amendment.
Further discussion on the amendment? Clerk, please call the roll on the
Wait, can I
amendment.
ask a question?
Sure.
Does this mean that if somebody lives outside of the 30 miles and they apply for the job, they would be required to meet the residency requirement?
No, it means that they couldn't apply. If they live outside the 30, if this passed, the amendment passed, if somebody lives outside the 30-mile radius, they're not allowed to apply.
Or they wouldn't qualify.
Even if they're willing to relocate?
Correct. The way the amendment was worded. Clerk, please call the
I
roll.
don't think it's getting after what the Counselor Peeler wants then, but fine, whatever.
I don't believe that would, I believe the current residency would still take place. I mean, if a person is a resident before they start the position, then that's moot. It doesn't matter where, right?
So the way you worded it, Counselor Peeler, was that in order to be considered, they have to be a resident within that 30 miles.
No, the ability is for you to to have your transgression to hire them, not to be candid, not to apply for the job, but for
Correct.
them to be hired.
Correct. But just to be clear about the amendment, the way it was stated was the city manager could waive the city residency preference, because right now it's a preference based on passing the previous amendment, if you live within 30 miles. Is that correct?
Correct.
Not if you live within 100 and move.
But
within
the
30.
logic is de facto that if they currently live here when the job is started, then they can still take the job. You could hire them. Because you don't need to lift the residency requirement because they live here.
So they would.
That
need-
holds.
But are you,
I was gonna say, just a clarifying question. So I'll use my own situation.
right,
When I took this position, I did not live within that 30 miles. If you had said that I needed to live within that to take the position, I wouldn't have been able to consider it because I wouldn't have been able to move within the city by the time my position started.
But we did extend it for you.
Oh,
No, 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 no.
Can I just-
We're talking, just let me, clarity.
Yeah, I think on the
Clarity.
way it's written right now. I
If-
see what you're trying to do.
If a candidate took the test and scored properly and lived 150 miles away
Can't,
and had every intention
to live in
to live
Geneva.
within 30 miles or live within the city of Geneva, they would not qualify based on your amendment.
No,
they
wait.
wouldn't qualify.
They would not qualify to live outside of the residence
No,
The
they
way-
qualified period.
Can
I
I,
know.
or within the 30
The
miles.
way the amendment was
Texas.
presented was they had to live within the 30 miles
To apply.
Not to apply, to be.
in order to be considered.
Be hired, not even considered. Listen,
Oh.
hold on, I want to really restate this clearly, because the way that this has been amended in the current state, all we've done technically is allow the city manager to use discretion to lift the residency requirement. If a
No, no,
candidate,
that's incorrect.
no, really?
Because we took away
is.
requirement and made it a preference.
No, we have
There's
a
a big
preference, but a
difference.
preference is not going to be enforceable. All
Yep,
right, saying our mission
exactly.
statement is not a, we
A
should.
preference, a requirement is enforceable. My wording
Preferences.
to the amendment that passed was the city council had a preference for city residency and gave the latitude to the city manager to waive that preference. And it also said replacing resolution 43-2009.
But that preference wasn't for an applicant, the preference was for the hire. So what I'm saying is if by the time the first day of that individual and they have residency, then they won't need to lift the requirement. It's like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter functionally and legislatively. We've moved to waive the requirement, or we've moved to give the city manager the ability to waive the requirement. But if the current hire of the chief, regardless to where they live when they applied, if they live here now, then the whole thing doesn't matter. And that's absolutely true. It is true.
can I speak?
Go ahead.
I mean, I asked this question because I pretty much figured this is what was happening. It seems to me that Counselor Peeler would like an amendment that says that someone who's living outside the 30-mile radius would be given time to establish residency. But if they're coming from outside the 30 miles, that residency would have to be in the city of Geneva. If they live within the 30 miles, then he feels like the commute is small enough that they shouldn't have to uproot their lives. But if they must uproot their lives, then they should reroute them in the city. Is that right?
Based on our current ordinance, that's exactly how it would read anyways. I mean, that's.
Well, when I
exactly how it
asked
would
the
go.
mayor
But yes,
that
is
before
right.
I voted for it, he gave me the opposite answer.
You're frozen, Counselor Salamandra.
I don't mean to confuse anyone. I just,
I'm confused, so.
Yeah.
I don't mean
Yeah,
to.
but-
I'm gonna ask a
I'm
question
trying
too,
to
if I
emphasize
could.
Frank's point that we don't want to uproot people.
Right, you don't know. So in other words, though, if somebody who lived 100 miles away applied and said, I really want this job and our city manager loves this person and wants to hire this person, they could not live in, well, if we go with 30 miles, they couldn't live in Fairport, they couldn't live in Seneca Falls. They would have to live in Geneva. And the only people who get to stay, who apply and not have to uproot, are the people who currently live within whatever the range is, 30 miles. Well, that's a totally, that would change
Yeah.
the whole thing.
Well, I sort of like where you're going with this, though. If you live 200 miles away, but all of a sudden you are, okay, maybe I'm going to move, whatever the fact may be.
Anyway,
Huh?
they're gonna uproot anyway.
Well, no.
Right,
I'm saying if
they
they,
should
whatever the fact may be, and you want to apply here,
Right.
okay, you're taking your shot, maybe you're putting in 20 applications for police chief, because that's what people do. Okay, that's what people do. And you live 100 miles away. If you are selected, if she, under her, just, if she says, wow, this guy's great, but the only way that you can I'm going to give you the job is if you move within the city of Geneva. If you live within the 30-mile residency requirement that we're trying to get here now with a boundary, and you weren't, so if you wouldn't have to uproot or move, you could apply and be hired, right?
The only problem with this is we have a different resolution on the floor now.
No,
which
I know.
Which talks about preference and talks about, so we would have to like start over again with this resolution, it seems, because we're talking about preference and now we're talking about a requirement for people.
Yeah, city manager would like to ask a question, please.
So one thing I do want you to think about is we're discussing this because we're in the potential of recruitment. Depending on how you determine this also could change for someone that's the incumbent. So you could have someone that decides they want a bigger home. They want to live in a different municipality. Right now, the option is you resign and you go someplace else, which is fair. However, if you change some of this, they may have the opportunity to say, come to the city manager, have a high performance and say, I'm trying to purchase a home. There's currently one home on the market in the city of Geneva. I no longer want to be a renter. I'd like to move in the town, or my family has property in the town. I just want you to understand that when you change this residency requirement, while we're focused on the recruitment aspect, whatever change you make on this also could have on the retention aspect.
We can make that change in improvise. Absolutely.
Counselor Cameron. I appreciate what
It
the
should
city,
be what-
I appreciate what the city manager said, but I think that what I would like us to do is coming out of us as a group is something that's not as, I think less murky. And so I guess I'm trying to simplify it for myself in my own head is that I want to give the city manager some discretion, but I want the largest pool of people to choose from because there's just all kinds of people out there who are all wonderful and we just don't know who they are. And we're going to hang out our little advertisement and they're going to say Geneva, wine, Evan Dawson, Geneva on the lake, whatever. And they're going to say, I want to get that job. Then they need to know if you apply for this job, you're going to have to be within the limit that we establish. And they will come and they will connect with this community because they'll know that that's part of their job. And so that's not murky. That's really clear. I don't want to constrain the pool we can tap by saying you've got to live within the 30-mile limit, so that's how I'd like to amend the resolution or the whatever.
You'd have to pass it first and then amend it. We're
We've got
on an amendment.
We have amendment on
what
the
is
floor. The amendment though is not what I said, right?
No.
Okay.
What you said is a whole new thing.
Sorry about that.
Well, no, I just wanted to add the existing residency to the stipulation of the city manager's ability to make that,
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
to make that discretion.
No.
Well, why can't it just be?
Counselor Noon. Hey, well, I got some hands raised.
Two questions. Number one, if we stuck with this, how would you advertise it? So like, what would the advertising sound like? That's question one. And then question two is, could we just go back to, is it too late to just go back to the original resolution
That's what I'm saying.
as it was written? So two questions.
I need that clarification. Are we talking about
Yeah.
Counselor Peeler's amendment? Did that have the vote?
That's
Correct.
It hasn't been voted on.
No,
No.
for the.
But I'm just curious, how, with his amendment, how would you advertise the position?
Yeah, so it would be, basically you would have to establish that, whatever within the 30-mile radius is acceptable for current residents within the radius, anyone outside of that radius would be expected to live within the city.
But the thing is, they'd have to move here on the chance that they might be considered as one of the top applicants. I don't think that's a chance anybody's going to take. So that Council Burrow, that limits our pool. Hold on.
I need some clarity on the amendment that we just passed from the mayor.
Yes.
you amended the now therefore be a resolved paragraph.
Yes. I amended it
There
to,
would-
to take away, to say that it is the city's council preference that the police chief and the fire chief live within the city of Geneva. And then I also said the Geneva City Council gives the city manager the latitude to waive the residency preference.
Right, which in turn doing that, there is no radius here.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, so we're also changing the title of Resolution 10/2023. So this
Yep,
is the,
Correct.
I needed the clarity because
Correct.
Councilor Peeler is now bringing the mileage back in.
In a different way, yes.
When we just took it out,
But in a different way.
but in a different way.
Could we just keep the preference part, but still say, that it's Geneva City
We
Council?
can, but we can't do
preference.
that right now.
I know, but I'm just asking because nobody
Yeah.
answered my
So,
second question.
Your second
But-
question is, no, you can't go back to the original resolution because it's already been approved and amended. But we can amend it again, and that's what Councilor Peeler is trying to do right now. So I'd like to call the vote, but I'm going to give you a last word, Councilor
Thank you.
Peeler.
I appreciate it. So I just want to address the fact of the matter and how we operate, which is historically observable. We hired a city manager and we had applicants that were like 300-400 miles away. Okay, that's a fact. Okay, and we all gave them the basic notion that if you want to work here, you want to live here, and we're absolutely going to give you a grace period to make that happen. And is that smoke? No, we did it for Amy, and we exerted grace. We would absolutely do that again if it was for the right police chief. But we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is the authority that we're giving the city manager, and that is without our discretion to lift the requirement. Okay, that's exactly what we're doing. Our preference is noted, great. But what this resolution is doing as it stands is giving the city manager the ability to act without our discretion. And my amendment is simply tying a little carrot to that discretion, that she can only do that unilaterally if the candidate currently lives within 30 miles. I think that's reasonable. If someone disagrees, that is your prerogative. But that is how my amendment is written. That authority will be irrelevant for out of 30-mile radius candidates who go through the normal process that would have happened like when we hired the city manager. And that is that they basically make a commitment to live here and then we exert grace. That's reasonable, and that would definitely happen. That's the last thing I want to say about it. It's my own personal opinion. If it doesn't fly, that's the way of the game.
So clerk, I'd like to call the roll on the amendment, and just for clarity,
Please repeat
on the
it.
amendment, Councilor Peeler is requesting that the city manager accept applications from residents. Wait, just let me finish. Accept applications from residents within the 30-mile radius, and anybody outside the 30-mile radius has to comply with the original requirement of moving within the city within 6 months.
That is not my amendment.
Then please clarify.
So
because
my
that's what
amendment,
I
so
have.
my amendment would be that the authority given to the city manager to waive the requirement can only occur if the existing applicant lives within 30-mile radius.
So help us understand if somebody
Because-
lives outside the 30. I think that's where. the
Because
gap is.
listen, the amendment that you made, Mr. Mayor, did not associate the authority of the city manager with the application process, but only the hiring process. Okay, it just,
So
you're adding the applicant process, but
So
that doesn't
it-
exist in the
all right.
current resolution.
Can I ask him a question?
What if somebody's outside the 30-mile radius? I need to understand that.
You can't.
You still can apply. This is a free country.
Why would you be able to apply? That's the
Because
thing.
why don't you have to move here?
Yeah, city managers all applied. They were all outside. Every single one. Every single city manager, or except for one. We're creating a problem where one doesn't even exist.
You clear what Bill's asking for us, and could you? I mean, it just seems like this is so confusing that if we could just get the resolution again.
not writing it down.
The other problem is we're acting on an amended I mean, this is a brand new resolution in my mind. It's not the same as what we just said we voted on, and I mean, we'd have to change. Yeah, because you're back into requiring, you're back into naming borders and.
Can Lori read the current amendment, please? I mean,
We're trying to open up the pool, right? We're not trying to open it up to the
Steve? Yeah.
world.
yes, can you please narrate that and I'll write it down?
Okay, now therefore be resolved that the Geneva City Council duly assembled and authorized does hereby set a preference for the police chief and fire chief
Hold on. Preference for police and fire, okay,
to live within the city of Geneva.
okay,
Geneva City Council.
Yep.
Also gives the city manager latitude to waive that residency preference.
residency requirement. It says
Preference.
It's a preference.
Waive our preference.
There is no requirement based on this resolution if
Oh,
it
so the new
passes.
Resolution doesn't even have the residency requirement,
Correct,
period. We're striking the residency requirement.
correct. Well, that's just the way it is right now. So Counselor Peeler, I'd love to call the vote on your amendment.
Yeah.
So right now, is it, before he puts up his amendment,
Striking.
there's no residency requirement. It's under the discretion of the city man.
It's just a preference.
Can we go back to the order before while Counselor Peeler gets his amendment together? And then vote on it? Because right now he doesn't have an amendment on the floor.
No.
Yes, he does have an amendment on the.
He's got one on the
He
floor. and
does,
it's been
he's not
se-
sure about it.
Why?
No, I wasn't
So
sure about the
conversation's
current
going to
language of the
continue. I don't
Mayor's ability
understand.
to waive the.
So can I call a vote or where should I go here? Because I think I need to call a vote because this is overwhelming.
No, but the mayor, though, I don't want us to have to make a mistake. Why don't we just pass this ordinance as written with the preference in it? And leave, and then come back.
I'm gonna read it. Hold
We
on.
will, and come
We've
back
got
to
it.
this, these amendments
You've got an
at
amendment on the
another
floor.
meeting.
You got to get past the amendment on the floor. That's
Okay.
procedure.
So let's call it,
So
call it
I'm
and
going to
defeat
call
it.
the vote.
Clarity about this, how this works right now. And
Okay.
only you two have done this so many times. So
You've
we
been in
amended
this-
it now. Can we call an amendment and take the amendment off to the original? Can we bring it back to
No.
the original?
No,
No, but we are not going to add another amendment.
you can modify,
Leave it alone.
you can amend it again if you'd like to
Yeah.
try that, like
So let's
Counselor
not-
Peeler's doing.
Let's right now just.
All right, I'm calling the vote. Clerk, please call the roll.
Can you
on
please
the-
read the amendment?
I'm gonna read it right now.
Okay, there it
I
goes.
think It's important that we read it. I'm gonna read it right now. So instead of a period after the mayor's amendment of council's preference,
Please read the whole thing.
I'm gonna read the amendment. So, because that's, the rest of it is my shorthand. So so also gives the city manager latitude to waive that preference if the candidate of choice currently lives within the 30-mile radius of the city of Geneva. And that is the amendment. And
Okay.
it's simple. It's not to deny applications.
Okay, okay.
Okay, but
I
right.
think we all got that, right? Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Peeler,
aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Nay.
Counselor Salamandra,
Nay.
Counselor Brim,
Nay.
Counselor Noon,
No.
Counselor Galanese,
Nay.
Counselor Burrow,
Nay.
Mayor Valentino.
Nay.
Motion defeated.
Now we're back to the original resolution as with one amendment that passed.
Oh, and I got,
Counselor Burrow, I see your hand up.
Yes.
I was after Bill.
I'm sorry.
So who's going?
Counselor Salamandra. Counselor Salamandra.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to respond to some comments. First of all, it's not ignorant to request that a leader of a department live in the city, whether or not you think it is. So unless you have an argument, then it just doesn't make sense to just say the opposite of what I say and call me ignorant. In fact, that community policing expert that they brought in a few years ago before Mike Paslacqua was hired, actually said this too. So the experts say it, the community has said it, we've heard it over the years in this community over and over again. And so I don't think ignorant is the right word just because you disagree. As far as the budget, I think that's the other part I want to make clear again. Counselor Noon indicated that I felt like maybe there would be some like nefarious behavior on the part of the chief to ramp up the budget, but that's not really what I was saying. When people get wealthy, they can move to the town. They can afford to move to the town where it's less expensive to live. And so if all of those people are moving to the town and the people who can afford to live in the town, buy property and live in the town, then the tax burden is now left to a much smaller base. One of the reasons people do that is because our budget is so high. So when I say that the chief should be responsible for its budget, it's not because he has to oversee the department. It's because he himself should have to pay the taxes that he has created the budget for. So I just wanted to clarify those not ignorant points.
Okay, so we're discussing the resolution as amended.
Yeah.
Counselor Galanese.
I want to know, with your amendment change, the advantage that it has over the original one that was written.
Because
Where does what you changing that one word enhance this?
it takes away a requirement, it takes away a distance, and it puts the responsibility in the city manager's hands, where it should be, to make a good decision on the next police chief. I'm ready to vote. Counselor Noon?
I do just want to clarify that if you listen to my comment in the beginning, I even led off with the importance of both chiefs living in the city. I did not say that the fact of them living here was ignorant. I said that making some of the false assumptions that I felt people were doing was ignorant.
Okay, let's get to the vote. Clerk, Counselor Burrow, before we go,
Thank
go
you.
ahead. I tried.
Had to refresh your memory. I would like to make an amendment to the resolution because I'm quite uncomfortable with labeling housing in Geneva as a crisis. It's not a crisis. Turkey and Syria are having a crisis. Okay, so
It's in there.
so I would, right, I don't see the purpose of having the fifth whereas. I would just like to eliminate it altogether because we don't have a housing crisis here. You just weren't quick enough to purchase the property that you wanted.
Can I ask you
This-
also to amend the
Yeah.
title while you're at it?
Okay.
Can I ask you also to amend the title while you're at it?
Yeah.
So please make that amendment.
I'm making two, we have a
Two
discussion on
changes.
two amendments.
Two changes to one amendment. I think Council Burrow's capable of doing it.
The first amendment is just deleting the fifth whereas. It's unnecessary based on the scope of the resolution. And then the second amendment, for second in discussion, I believe, would be amending the title from resolution requiring residency of more than 30 miles for police and fire chiefs to, put me on the spot here, Mayor, with my wordsmithing. Resolution for residency, not I'm not going to put preference in there.
Resolution for residency, just residency.
Resolution, that sounds good. I think Councilor Peeler said it best. Resolution requiring city manager to authorize authority to authorize police and fire chief residency.
Second for that,
I'm gonna have to write it out there. It's pretty
Council Peeler.
gobbledygook. Pretty.
Clerk, did you catch that?
I think so.
Okay, great. Any discussion? Can we move on to a vote?
Well, I'm
Discussion,
just, I do want to talk about how the fact that Tom doesn't feel that there's a housing crisis. Obviously, a crisis,
Housing is
the
on the
def-
agenda.
I know, but I'm asking him. So the housing crisis, a crisis is obviously different. It's going to look different depending on the community, might look different amongst different groups of people. But I'm just very curious, Tom, what you have to say to people who live up in the Chanticleer, living in squalor, who can't find a home because we don't have the appropriate home that fits their bill. What kind, you don't call that a crisis? How about the city residents that, you know, unfortunately the elderly who have to move elsewhere because we don't have the appropriate
Can we
housing
save
for
that for the
theirs?
housing discussion?
So that
please?
would be crisis. I'm just kind of curious as to,
You
you,
can-
you just told a number of voters that they don't have a housing crisis. Good thing you're not running
We
again,
can save
Tom.
that for the discussion, and if you don't want to make the amendment, you can vote no. Clerk, please call the roll on the amendment to change the title and eliminate the fifth whereas.
Counselor Burrow,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Nay.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
Counselor Noon,
No.
Counselor Galanese, Mayor Valentino,
Aye.
motion carried.
Now we're gonna vote on the resolution as amended twice. Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Galanese,
What are we calling that one now?
So this is. The title is changed, what Council Burrow and Council Peeler just mentioned. The fifth whereas is gone, and then now therefore be it resolved has been changed, as I mentioned before, to make it a preference and give the city manager the latitude to waive that preference.
Do you want me to read the title?
Is that clear?
Tom wrote it- We wrote it down.
Huh?
Do you want me to read the title? We wrote it down.
Yeah.
The title is Resolution Authorizing City Manager to Lift Residency Requirement for Police and Fire Chief.
Period.
Period. No one
Okay.
else.
Everybody's clear with the resolution as amended. Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Galanese,
Aye.
Counselor Burrow,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Reluctantly, aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Nay.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
Counselor Noon,
I'd still like to see a radius in there, so no.
Mayor Valentino,
Aye.
motion carried.
Okay. I gotta get back to my agenda here. Next is a discussion regarding city manager and city clerk residency requirement. And this is an ordinance, and it currently requires both the city manager and the city clerk to live within the city of Geneva. Unfortunately, we have a retirement coming this year, so we're gonna have to address that. The discussion can start wherever you'd like it, whether you'd like to change it or keep it as is. I've reviewed the city charter, so I guess I'll jump on it first. I've reviewed the city charter and I'm happy with the way it is. I think it was important that the city manager and the city clerk, who is pure customer service and record keeping and a variety of other things that she deals with council, is important to live within the city. So that's where I stand. Anybody else want to discuss it? Oh, Counselor Salamandra and then Counselor Regan.
I also believe that residency requirements are important for people who are in high performance jobs in the city. I wonder why we didn't just do it for the police chief, but yeah, I agree. The city manager and the clerk and the fire chief and the police chief should all be required to live in the city where they receive salaries triple the times of average Genevans.
Counselor Regan.
Yeah, I agree that I would love to see everyone who works here live here, but I agree a requirement for the city manager and the city clerk makes a lot of sense, and I'd like to see it stay as it is currently.
Do you have your hand up, Counselor Galanese?
So I have a question. I know that in Tompkins County, a lot of municipalities are lifting the city manager residency requirements, and coming from that neck of the woods, can you explain to me the understanding of why? Is it the same thing that we're trying to get to as far as a police chief quality and more applicants?
So just on that, the city manager residency requirement is not getting lifted as frequently. The clerk requirement, and I think the clerk explained in the last meeting, a lot of your clerks are elected officials, and so they have a residency requirement. Our clerk is not. The two city clerks are not. So the two cities in Ontario County are not. The city manager requirements have not been lifted in most places. Any place that residency requirements have been listed, it has been to increase the applicant pool. Something that's different in the private sector than the public sector is the ability to work much more remotely, not being on site as much. You see a lot of that with your executive CEOs and others not having a residency requirement. I think that's what the public sector is trying to do, is to figure out how do we recruit and retain talent when we don't have the same rules. I think a part of that, though, is to acknowledge that we are not the same businesses. And so there's a difference there. But at this point, I think the documents I gave you guys that had many different places still maintain the city manager requirement, but not city clerk requirement.
Council Peeler.
I think leaving the city manager requirement alone is appropriate. And I would entertain an argument that we apply something similar to the city clerk that we just did for fire and chief, using the city manager's discretion. Because we already heard from Amy that is for appointed or hired positions. It's common for the city manager to have that discretion. But I don't know what it would take for our city clerk to become an elected position in the city. That'd probably be a charter change, right?
Just-
And a local law or something like that.
A reminder, it is our appointment.
Right, well, our appointment, no, I get it, but what I mean is the only way that we could. If the city clerk in this community was an elected position, we wouldn't be able to lift that requirement because the election requires residency. So, and I don't know if a solution for residency would be moving that position to an elected position. I know it's probably possible. We have to change the charter. But I'm just willing to entertain some information about if the city manager thinks it would be appropriate to be given the same discrepancy that we just gave you.
So I wouldn't have that discrepancy because that's
Because it's our appointment.
that's your employee. So the city manager and the city clerk are your employees.
The residency requirement is also
Yep.
ours and ours alone to discern.
It's in your charter. Yep.
So if we wanted to lift the residency requirement for the city clerk, we'd have to change the charter,
Correct.
not just do a ordinance or
It's similar to an ordinance. You do 2 votes with a public
readings.
hearing.
In a public hearing. And probably similar if you wanted to move it to a referendum, to move it to a voted position.
Right,
probably have to
right.
do something
Yep.
like that. Counselor Gallinasia, I see your hand up.
Well, that being said, that you just said it changes everything, so I just assume keep it the way it is.
Okay, I'm going to move on the agenda then. Next is a discussion regarding short-term rentals. Counselor Salamand, you requested this to be on there, and just to note that, thanks staff, that staff has quite a few slides in here, that they provided us. So I'm going to let you kick it off, Counselor Salamandra.
Thank you. Okay, since the pandemic, we have seen a boom in Airbnb, which is defined as a homestay for vacation rentals, meaning a person rents out a house, apartment, or private room for a short time. This is an attractive option for people hoping to buy a vacation home or rental property because the income from the short-term rental pays off the property, making it a safer and much more lucrative investment for the buyer. But what does it do to a community? A homestay requires a house, a home, to lease on a nightly or weekly basis. This removes that property, which once housed a resident or family of residents, from the long-term rental market, creating what experts have named the Airbnb effect. This is decreasing an already short supply of housing. Combine that with a major slowdown of new construction, and you have our current situation: a lack of housing for renters, a lack of housing for homeowners, and rents and mortgages that neither can afford. In fact, mortgages are the highest they've been since 2006. And as I've mentioned before, a community that pays more than 30% of its income towards housing is a financially unwell community. One left to somehow figure out how to also afford the rising cost of gas and groceries. All over the country and in Geneva, renters are being forced out of their communities by the crisis short-term rentals are causing. A quick look at listings in the city of Geneva would reveal that we are not experiencing the Airbnb effect mildly. There are dozens of listings in each neighborhood, and I can't help but wonder what happened to the folks who used to live there. You may be thinking that people have a right to do what they want with their property and that government should stay out of it. So I would like to take another quick minute to mention some of the other very real consequences of the Airbnb effect. We will lose residents. 1. When rental units are converted from long-term to short-term rentals, it is no surprise that the city would have less residents and more travelers. We know that it is our residents who make the city what it is. Their visions, commitment to their neighborhoods, and stewardship of our local environment matters. By legislating this problem, we would show our residents we care about them as much as the tourists who come in the summer. And that would be appropriate since it's their property taxes paid through a landlord by renters that keep our city running. 2, local businesses suffer. And some of these businesses include local hotels that have pilots. It is important that businesses that were thriving here can continue to thrive. What happens to the workers at our local hotels when their hours are cut? How will they afford the ever-increasing rent? When our coffee shops can't find counter help, it is not because people don't want to work anymore, is because they can't afford to live here and get to work. The tourism industry survives on the work of low-wage tipped workers who must be able to afford to live in the city. 3, neighborhoods suffer. How can a neighborhood thrive when no one is responsible to one another, when neighbors don't have to connect, when there is no obligation to each other? Not only do Airbnbs affect the camaraderie in our community, but they also make neighbors unhappy. Complaints include disruptive visitors, litter, noise disturbances, and illegal parking. Airbnbs can also inflate property values. They don't necessarily raise the actual value, but they do make it cost more, driving low-income folks out. 4, it's a reduced tax revenue. A major misconception about Airbnbs is that they don't cost cities money. People say that since the owner is still paying property taxes, the city doesn't suffer, but that isn't accurate. When someone rents a hotel, they pay an occupancy tax. When they rent an Airbnb, they don't. This means we are losing money by not legislating short-term rentals. It means we all have consequences without any extra financial benefit that could help offset the problems. This is why it's important to have this discussion tonight. While I anticipate that some of you have thought deeply about this, I also expect some resistance to interfering with people's personal property. So in an effort for a productive conversation, I hope we can go around and say what we think the solution might be. I can offer some suggestions. We could make Airbnbs illegal. We could do a zoning update that made the practice completely illegal. 2, we could zone them. A quick look at Geneva reveals that there are rentals in every neighborhood. We could think about this together and hear public comment as a community and designate some neighborhoods we think would make sense, like maybe the lakefront or some of downtown, while leaving residential neighborhoods for long-term rentals. This should be done before we finalize the zoning update. 3, we could tax them. Like all businesses in the city and state, we could require short-term rentals to register and pay taxes. We could use this money in a separate fund that could mitigate some of the harmful effects of short-term rentals or add it to the general fund as revenue. 4, we could look to the county for a solution. We could work with our county legislators to see what other communities are doing and do some regional planning for once, so we don't put some Finger Lakes communities at a greater or less disadvantage. 5, we could require short-term rentals to be owner occupied. This suggestion eliminates most of the problems associated with Airbnbs because owners would be required to stay in the unit 6 months of the year. It means folks who want to winter in Florida or sublet while they travel or care for family would be able to, while not diminishing their commitment to their neighborhood's economic health or beauty. This solution would also allow for in-law or private rooms to be rented. All of these suggestions have been implemented in other communities. We could look to them for help in writing our legislation, but first we must decide our values. There are at least 315 homeless families in Ontario County. People are leaving Geneva every day because they can't afford it. Homes that used to have kids playing in the yard sit empty because the owners can make more money in a week than a month. Some of you might say that it is the market and that isn't the role of government to legislate these issues, but then I would ask you to take this time to suggest another solution to the housing crisis I believe, and a lot of people believe we are facing. I will take what I hear tonight to the Geneva Affordable Housing Task Force and work with them to flesh out what we can agree to. I can go first. My number one choice is to ban Airbnbs. I do not believe in a system where some are left homeless while others get rich, so I would eliminate them entirely over the course of a year. I do not think the benefit to individual homeowners is worth the cost to the city, and I will always value the well-being of the many over the few. I recognize this won't get the most votes, so my second favorite option is to legislate that all short-term rentals must be owner-occupied for 6 months of the year. This is because owner-occupied mortgage holders have proven to be more responsible towards building maintenance and more responsible to the community. And this is also in line with our comprehensive plan.
Okay, I like the suggestion of going around and everybody having the opportunity to provide that. And Counselor Galanese is really quick at the hand. So
can you make sure that you provide that entire document to Lori to go on the record, please, that you just read to us? And if you don't mind, if you could send it to all of us, I think it'd be very helpful.
Sure.
It sounds like you did a lot of research.
Counselor Galanese, and we'll just go around the horn.
Your mic isn't on.
I feel as though this conversation needs to be had, but I also believe that the dynamics of this are very complex. And I believe that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to regulating. I also think that we are not starved of housing because of local Airbnbs. We're starved of housing because of a college that has bought up a majority of properties in Geneva and has taken them off the tax roll. These Airbnbs still pay taxes. The landlords and the owners paid taxes. The college does not. And I would love to know from our city manager and staff, how many of those houses in the last 20 years have been taken off the tax roll that Hobart has acquired, or property. Because we're not putting into consideration that those houses could be used for housing of the housing crisis we have, and the shortage of housing stock that we have, for the crisis that we do have. There is a problem. Laura has pointed out several things I agree with. We are not dominated by tourism like Jersey Shore or Newport, Rhode Island. We cannot tie the expansion of short-term rentals to rising rents and home prices. Of course, the pandemic led to skyrocketing home prices and rental increases. Many landlords also are on the hook and still on the hook for their mortgages, when many renters, not all, but many and some, chose not to pay their rent because they could do that, and others and most couldn't afford to pay their rent. So there's a twofold there. The reality is that home sharing has been an important part of the fabric of vacation destinations for decades, and now we are becoming a destination. Geneva is becoming a destination more than ever, and that is not a bad thing. I'm in favor of maybe an annual permit at this time, as any other regulation should really be thought through, as the dynamics, like I said, are very complicated. I believe the focus, more so than what we're talking about right now, the housing crisis and lack of stock, what Laura was talking about, is something that has to be entertained. There is a problem, but I believe the focus should be on economic development and on the building of new buildings for more housing for people in Geneva, period. The housing stock in rental stock just isn't there. We cannot conform to limited lodging if you want to be a destination city. And, you know, I'm curious to know how many there are in the city of Geneva. I'm sure there's a lot, but, you know, I know that other cities have problems financially when you start regulating them. You have to hire more staff. You have to hire more code enforcement. There's a lot that's involved in this, and I think that we're putting the cart before the horse, and there's other things we should be concentrating on. Laura's points that she made, a lot of them are ones that are a concern, and we should be putting under a magnifying glass and really looking at them, because that is a problem. This is a problem too, but on a smaller scale. Yeah, we could make some money by regulating them, but I also think that and believe in the long term, we're going to be paying out a lot of money to regulate them. If you look across the country, these are problems that other municipalities are having. And like I said, it's not a one size fit all when it comes to regulating. So what works for Ithaca, what works for Chicago or any small municipality doesn't mean that it's going to work from here. We sort of are in a very rare situation where the scales are tipped. I mean, let's just say if you're looking at the pie, and I'm not going to put the real numbers out there, but let's just say 80% of the city is non-for-profit, 20% is that you're trying to play catch up with something that's so out of whack, and you're trying to find ways to, yes, the crumbs add up to the pie, but I feel like we're always trying to make more work to try to create revenue when there's revenue to be made in abundance in Geneva, and we overlook those things by talking about things that this is a big deal, but it takes an awful lot of time and effort to be able to get to what we're trying to get to. And I'm sure if Amy wrote a resolution, we would spend hours on it saying this doesn't sound right and that doesn't sound right. And I get it, but we have to have faith. And I just think that there's other things we should be concentrating on besides Airbnbs. Like, let's create revenue. Let's beautification. But I still, the number one thing that the city needs is to create revenue. The bottom line, the only way we're going to get out of the high taxes we pay, the high water and sewer bills we pay, all this other stuff to me is just noise in my ear. The real problems, the real solutions that we need to come up with as a city council is how to create revenue, how to get an economic developer here that promotes this city. We have something that no one else does, and we're not even tapping into it. We talk, and then the boat passes by the port, and Watkins Glen does it, Canandaigua does it, and then we say we're not second best. But to me, I feel like we're second best to a lot of people, and I hate saying that, but we miss the boat. In revenue creation and economic development should be the two number one things that we talk about. This right here, right now, it's important. I believe the things and the points that Laura made are more important than this. I know they go hand in hand, but I think that priorities, and this is to me about regulating Airbnbs, is not a priority. Just like I want to also bring up on something else that we talked about that we just passed under the wayside.
I'd like to stick to the.
It has to go with this because it's sort of the same thing. It's resident.
Short-term rental related.
Mr. Mayor, I have the floor and I'd like to keep talking.
Yeah,
You always want to cut me off and I'm not going to have it.
Because you go off
So
on
anyways, we wanted to have a rental registry for landlords. I'm against that until that's looked further and the people of this community that are landlords feel comfortable with it, because I already believe that there is a landlord registry, which is the fire department. And that goes hand in hand with this too, as regulating these short-term rentals. So I think that we're just kicking the can down the road. We're talking about this. It sounds all fine and dandy. We're not going to do anything about it because I think that the little steps that we make down the road are going to bite us in the butt unless we do this properly.
Council Brim.
It's definitely a very complex situation. We definitely have low stock. We have some low quality houses for our renters. We've also got limited numbers. College is definitely taking away some of that information, or not even information, but some of that stock for their students. How many of those students could also remain on campus? No, they're not.
No, they're not.
5 and 20 is littered with students. From Jefferson all the way down to the bridge for 14.
Yeah, we got kids living on my street in 2 houses.
Yeah.
I've got them living on my street too. The college has them all over the place. We need to look at revenue generation to reduce the taxes, which will then attract new developers. So we're kind of at that impasse. We need to find a way to reduce taxes to draw in the development. But we also need to look at where our stock is going. We have an aging housing stock. We don't necessarily have the financials to dump into said stock. We're kind of at an impasse. We need to find something that we can do to fix the stock, get the stock going back up, which we're doing with the Legion project, but we need more of it. I think minimally licensing the Airbnbs would be appropriate.
I agree with what the counselor said about it. The complexity of this issue, I think that we have to study it and we have to bring this under control. We don't want it to get out of control. In other words, we don't want to regulate it backwards. What we want to do is constrain how it grows or works through the community. So I think it's a timely thing for us to decide to do something about it. I would be in favor of a moratorium while we study this and finish and figure out things, and or go for the owner occupancy option, which is been documented in here, just for a period of time, so that we can get all this out and figure it out. I think we do have the housing problem in the city of Geneva. I misspoke. The college's objective is to get everybody back on campus. We have heard, I'm sure all have heard about the revenue issues that are related to the fall in enrollment. This enrollment situation is not like a blip. Apparently, it's here to stay. And so over the period of time, over the next couple of years, students are going to be reined back in and put into the empty dorm rooms. There's a serious issue there in the colleges. So I stand corrected on it. It's not 100%. It's but that's the direction the colleges are going in. In terms of, I think that we've got to get on this zoning thing, and we've got to on the rezoning of the city. It's now become, I think, a top priority. We have to zone for multifamily on the south side of the city. We can come up with some very beautiful, and we have many options in terms of coming up with beautiful, appropriate multifamily complexes out there. We don't have to scare all the people who are living out there for the last 30 years who are in single family, 1 and 2 and 3 acre lots, that their quality of life is going to be spoiled. It's not. There's ways to create buffers and everything else, but there's at least an option for us to grow and to get 100 plus more units out there. There's other places we have on the table. I think that we can do an infill development in this city. I think it's a homegrown project that we can do, so we can build up housing and things like that. So to come back to the short-term rentals, let's not let this get out of control while we are now going to take advantage with the housing study and everything else in the way we're going to develop our housing stock and how we're going to address the problems. And the way you address the problems is multifaceted. So we have to think of short-term rentals in the context of the other strategies that we're going to implement. And if the governor is really true to this 800,000, creating this 800,000 units, then, and one of the things I left it on the floor of my office, but one of the things that's interesting about this legislation is it's not going to trickle down, through large funding agencies and everything else. We can directly access funds from the governor for specific problems in our community, things that address our problems. So it doesn't have to be, one size fits all. We don't have to take the options or strategies that the state is going to mandate. There's funds for us to develop our housing plan for the entire city, create new construction, to renovate old construction, to regulate short-term rentals, and to create a variety of strategies that'll help solve the problem. Add Section 8 and, coming up with other solutions. So that's my speech. I yield the floor. I'd like to propose short-term moratorium and limit short-term rentals to owner occupancy while we figure this out. The housing study is going to get underway. I would say by the end of the year, it should be done, and we'll have a strategy, so people don't have to wait too long.
Counselor Regan.
Yeah, I think this is very complicated. There's a lot to look at. I mean, to me, a part of this started with the whole concept that a hotel does give us some revenue in terms of occupancy tax and not Airbnbs. And that's like a real minimum to me to get there. But you do have to address the character of the neighborhoods. I don't agree that this is something, I don't think we have to do one thing. I mean, I don't mind at all addressing lots of topics, and this is an important one. And I don't want to just say, yeah, we just have to build revenue and not look at something like this, which is an important issue for the character of neighborhoods and for where we are in terms of getting some sort of revenue from places like this. There's a lot of in addition to all that Councilor Salamander just said, we do have in our packets quite a bit to consider. And that's, I think we have to consider. I mean, this is a great little, between the two in particular, I mean, a lot to look at. And I don't really understand what a moratorium would do. Would that like restrict people currently? There's a lot of really beautiful Airbnbs that are out there. I would not want to ban them altogether. I think there's a lot of people who have put time and effort in renovating some of them pretty much delinquent buildings. And I mean, I'm talking about like on the Park Place area in particular, I think. But we've got to look at the housing situation as a whole. The Airbnb thing does factor in there. I think it's something to study. I wish I could say I have my opinion and I know what I want to do. I guess what I want to say is I want to study this a little bit more. I definitely want to see us attack the problem and talk about it further. I don't want to blame the colleges for taking properties off the, pointing fingers like that, I think is not productive. The colleges add a lot to our community as well. Including a lot of these people are coming to the city and staying in Airbnbs for that matter, or hotels, and then a lot of people who end up living here. So, I mean, I think we have to focus on this, and again, I don't have a total answer. I appreciate it being brought before us. And I think we should study it and all the issues that are around it. And I appreciate the fact that it's on the table.
Councilor Burrow.
I want to thank the city for putting together the presentation in our packet. I actually did not realize how many options there were of the municipalities that have taken months and months, and some municipalities have taken years in developing a program that fits their community. Complex, I think, is mild, because the municipalities that I have been involved in with residents that put these together, they have their own little issues with why they are developing a plan for SRTs. It's either Varick or Fayette right now is working through this. It's been months and months and months, and these decisions are not easy when you want to legislate something. Our own town of Geneva did it for one very unique way, which is kind of comparable to what's going on the other side of the lake, where people are purchasing lakefront property to retire in, and then the houses around them are being sold to an investor where it's 100% short-term rental. And that's oftentimes doesn't create a relaxing retirement home for you. So many of the comments here, all the comments that I've heard tonight are most valid. I'm thinking that, maybe it would be valuable to have a public hearing to get people from different sectors of the community, as well as the people that are promoting perhaps no legislation. I have seen B&Bs in apartment buildings, like Jan has mentioned, that actually enhance the neighborhood. But we can't say that about all neighborhoods in our city, depending on the concentration of Airbnbs on that street or in that neighborhood. So there's all sorts of ways to work this. It's probably not going to be legislated in 3 or 4 or 5 meetings in equal number of months, but I'm glad that it's on the table. Laura, thank you for all of the details there. You're spot on so many of those comments. So I do like the idea of having a limitation on certain types of SRTs, owner occupancy, and also having short-term rental really changes the complexity of your issue wherever it may be. Other challenges that there are would be, 5-unit apartment buildings that are not owner occupied, and all 5 units are actually short-term rental. And one of the newer business developments that's happening in that type of occupancy is that a tenant will sign a long-term contract for that apartment, and it will actually be 100% short-term rental. So I pay you the rent for the apartment month by month, but now I'm subletting that apartment day by day. And so that's happening here in Geneva. So the public is looking for different housing options. Short-term rental is probably here to stay. Europe is way ahead of us as far as what they do with their short-term rentals, and their the Fairfield Inns and et cetera in Europe are almost non-existent. It's all short-term rental, but how it's regulated, I can't speak to that. So I think we should keep this on the table and figure out where to go with how to get to second base.
Counselor Peeler.
Thank you. I'm super excited about this conversation. I'm a homeowner, with a family, and we've seen the Airbnbs move in, the short-term rentals. None of us can deny that it exists. I think there's a larger conversation here, and it is complex, but to take us back a little bit farther, before any of us were even elected, Geneva was already in the throes of a saturation point just for rentals, regular rentals. And for the first time in our history, our residency went over 50% rental as opposed to single family homeowner. So there's a lot to be said about what we're doing with our housing stock and how it's being scooped up. We don't have the ability to properly regulate or even inspect or code for single family rentals, right? We put tons of code and regulations, and we tax them differently for usage for multifamily establishments, but that's not Geneva's primary mode of renting. So we've got that to deal with too. I don't necessarily know how to go at it, but I can say this. I'm going to read some things here and tell me what you think, or I want to just go on your head if you think this applies to Geneva. And from a website called zdnet.com, which is a technology, innovation, and business website, there's an article called "Is Your City Dying? 7 Indicators of the Health of Your Community." And these are not written by flakes. These are written by this is research, college professors and other experts weighing in here. And these are yes or no questions, right? Is the size of your population going down? Is the average local income also going down? Meaning, are the people moving out making more money than the people moving in? Is the population getting older? Are families developing in the community, or are families leaving or not staying? Are residents not paying taxes or mortgages?
Are they living in subsidized housing, or are they paying taxes and mortgages? Are important buildings or landmarks going unused or in decline? Does land sit in your community unused because there's nothing to do with it? Are huge areas of your city unrecovered or undeveloped while other areas seem to flourish? Now, these are just the 7 things, and they talk about them, and I'll let people make their own decisions about how that applies to Geneva. But I think those are really strong indicators, and me personally, I can associate every single one of them within the city of Geneva. Now, as far as home ownership and short-term rentals, my opinion is if we want to combat short-term rental, we need to incentivize single-family home ownership. Not condemn these people, but make buying a home and living there, make it more attractive than the alternative. I don't necessarily know how to do it, but I know that if you incentivize a behavior, you'll generally get the behavior. And if you incentivize the behavior that you don't want, you'll get that too, right? You plant corn, you grow corn. Okay, so home ownership is really important. I'm reading an article here from a Harvard study that indicates that even though housing crises exist, civic engagement from homeowners still persists. Though that's good for a community. There's another article right here that says if you have they pulled renters and homeowners that lived in the community for more than 4 years. The homeowners who lived in those communities for more than 4 years were 400% more likely to volunteer and join community organizations. Now that's a healthy community. Okay, so home ownership is really important. So as far as Airbnbs are concerned, maybe we can code them differently, require inspections so that they're safer homes and that they're protected for the people that stay there. But I don't know how we're going to be able to regulate private property like this other than code. And my personal opinion is that we should incentivize home ownership. I don't know how, but rather than condemn other people, let's promote the people that we want. Right? Let's promote the behavior that we want. Right? Because it's really the behavior that we're trying to go for here. Thank you.
Counselor Noon.
Just a quick question first. When looking at the slide about the town of Geneva and where communities stop with those types of regulations, how many of those regulations do we currently have in regards to annual inspections, notice to neighbors, all of those things?
For Airbnbs, we don't have any regulations.
So I definitely think this is an issue that should be addressed. I do think this is a work session. I would really like to see the county become involved in this. It would be nice to see how they could be integrated in the conversation, including our county supervisors, but also county administration, I think would be very helpful. So I definitely think at the very least, we could look at, an Airbnb occupancy tax. As Bill was just alluding to, maybe some annual inspections, notifying the neighbors that that's what that property is going to turn into. Very simple. I mean, when looking at what the town of Geneva and other communities do, these are very simple, I quote, implementations that we could potentially do. I think Laura raises some great points. This is now the second time though we've brought this up. So I know that we aren't going to legislate, heavily in a very short period of time. However, I really think at the bare minimum, we could definitely implement annual inspections, requiring people to do notice to neighbors. So I'd really like to see when we could get this on the docket, either later this month or in April for a work session. But in between that work session, have staff maybe reach out to the county, invite them in, let them know some of our thoughts, and maybe see if we can get some productivity out of this versus just, again, bringing it up a third time and then a fourth. And then, like many things we bring up, just go absolutely nowhere. So I would really like to see us move forward with this sooner than later.
Thank you. I agree, Counselor Noon. I think, I don't think there's anybody on this council that hasn't had a conversation with a resident about the impacts of short-term rentals in their neighborhood, how it's affecting the fabric of their neighborhood. I've had multiples of them, and as complex as this might seem, I think there's some quick hitters here, and I really would like to kind of move forward with some of them. As I went through the list, I'm thinking the license permit thing is a quick hitter. Occupancy tax short-term rentals, we regulated Airbnbs. Hotels are already regulated. Both of them are getting hurt by not regulating or taxing short-term rentals. So I think that's not just one thing is income, but it also supports our other rental, whether it's hotels or Airbnbs in the community. It supports them, kind of putting them on an even platform. Occupancy limits, you know, if you rent an Airbnb in many locations, you'll find out that it's no more than 2 people per bedroom. So if there's a 3-bedroom house, it should be limited to 6 people. If there's 10 people in there, there's an issue. So there should be occupancy limits. And to me, I didn't know how to address this one, but using limitations and a list of parties and a few other things, that seems to be the biggest issue. When you get a renter in there that just wants to come to the community, enjoy the community, and is respectful, works great. But when you get a party that shows up and it overflows into the neighbors, that's an issue. And I think what I'd like to talk about maybe in this work session would be some kind of point system, where if you have a short-term rental and you have these kind of activities taking place, and there has to be a code issue or there has to be a police issue that shows up, there's a point system that starts accumulating. And I'm not sure how we will work it, but how do you impact the owner of that property to put some kind of limitations and put maybe some reliability and concern into their property to make sure it's maintained properly and to make sure that they kind of screen the applicants that are going to be there and put some kind of structure to how the rental takes place. Even noise ordinances, you know, I know people have been called at the 10 p.m. noise ordinance, and the police will come, and then an hour later the police got to come again, and then an hour later the police got to come again. That's not good for the neighborhood, and it's sure not good for us having to respond for those kind of issues. So those are my big hitters. I took it from the deck. I really appreciate it, all the effort that staff put in. I would love to move forward and try to make some things happen, even some short-term wins. I think that would be great. Pardon?
I'm just wondering, is it illegal to have a short-term moratorium while we study all the counselors' remarks, all of us, are just show how complex this is, as well as this presentation that staff has given us.
I kind of like the moratorium idea, but I don't know how you would know that a person buys a property with the intention of short-term rental. So I think there's the challenge of really understand, once they start renting it or advertising it, then it's kind of easy to kind of pull that in, but it's already too late.
But just one thing about your comments about all the point systems and everything else. This sounds like a regulatory burden. In other words, we're going to need, we might need so much, we might need lots of fees, because we're going to have to hire somebody who's going to basically watch all these places. We can't add it to the burden the code people have.
When I talk about short-term wins, though, a lot of these are already being addressed.
Okay.
The police are getting phone calls already. You know, and to me, that's how you initiate the point system. You don't do anything extra. You just collect that data and do something with it. I saw a couple of hands up, Councilor Gilman.
If you're talking, your mic's not on.
I can hear you. Hold on.
So you mentioned the word moratorium, and I had it written down, and I just want it sort of goes hand in hand, but it doesn't really, but I want to state this. If we're going to do a moratorium, like you said, Mayor, or like Ken said, it's going to be hard to regulate, right? But I also believe that if we're going to have a moratorium, that we should have a moratorium to not allow any more non-for-profits to buy houses or real estate and take it off the tax bill. Is that possible?
No, I tried that already. Tried it already.
Well, can we do it as a council, saying that this council does not agree with it, but we can't prevent it?
We can make a public statement, but there's no, it's a law. You can't stop it.
I mean, that's
Unfortunately,
where these problems stem from.
I even tried to do a percentage of the overall property, and that didn't work either.
This is why I recommended incentivizing the behavior we want rather than just milking the bad behavior, because the bad behavior is going to they'll pay. They will pay. And then we're not going to fix the problem.
Councilor Salamandra, you want to jump in?
Yeah, please. Okay, on incentivizing, I hear you, and I think that it is good to do that. But in this particular case, I don't think it's that people don't want to buy homes. It's that they either can't afford the homes because they're being bought by an out-of-town LLC, and that place, like 200,000 is nothing to them to put out that kind of money for an investment. When here for a first-time home buyer, that is really kind of impossible. So if we were looking to how to get people into owner occupied houses, I think that what they need is actual help. I don't know if, I think, and also on the housing stock, I think that there should be a community tool shed, and I think that you can get grants for that. So I don't know if we can look into that. As far as the Airbnbs, I hear let's get it before it's out of control, but my assessment would be that it is out of control. A quick look at the Airbnb app. If you don't put in a week or a number of guests, you can still search and zoom in. So like if you zoom in on the bottom of like along Pulteney Street, one block, there could be 12, 14, up to 25 in a neighborhood. And they're like, it surprised me that they were so far up into Ward 3. I thought that those were, I didn't realize that those were Airbnbs. So, it is a major problem. I'm not really sure what if you can do. It also seems unfair that people might be purchasing them at this time when we're having the discussions to legislate them. So I don't know if Amy has advice for that.
Council Brim?
Just to kind of speak to the point system you mentioned, I want to say it was a couple of years ago, Rochester actually started that very same thing. And it was yanking permits once you reach that limit. There's already been 3 or 4 bars and restaurants that have gotten in trouble to the point where they've had discussions over removing those permits. So we definitely have those options and it's already presented. So we definitely find a way to incorporate that.
Is everybody up for a work session on this one? Okay. So maybe we can, I think we have to deal with a meeting in March, late this month for a couple issues we're gonna need to address. So let's look at our calendars and kind of look out in April, maybe the second or third week in April. Speaking of April, the first meeting in April is during Yom Kippur or Passover. It's April 5th. Does anybody have any reservations? If you do have reservations about meeting on that night, I wouldn't want to put anybody in an imposition. Pardon? I don't know about school. It's just Passover, so. So just reply back to everybody. If April 5th is an issue for you, please let us know and we can move it to the week after that, which is April 12th. And maybe we can target April 19th or the 26th for a work session, okay?
It would make sense to me that we would move it and observe the Jewish holiday. There's a lot of Jew and all kinds of holidays because
Yeah, I'm okay. I just need a majority to push it. So.
we have residents that observe them, so.
Yep. The regular council meetings on the 5th. I need council's input if you would like to move that to the 12th.
No.
This is regular council meeting.
Because it's
Passover. And then the work session will be another time in April with the 19th or the 26th. That's at least what I'm suggesting. I'm open for suggestions, okay? All right, I'm gonna move down the agenda. Appointments to boards and commissions, and I believe Councilor Galanese, you got a couple? Mic on? Is your mic on?
Sorry. The zoning board of appeals would like to reappoint Robert Meyer, Antonio Gomez, and Jeff Greco.
Second by Councilor Camera. Any discussion? Clerk, please call the roll on those appointments.
Counselor Galanese,
Aye.
Counselor Burrow.
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
Counselor Noon, Mayor Valentino.
Aye, and
Motion
thank you,
carried.
gentlemen, for your commitment to the board. I appreciate that. Sorry, Gloria, I interrupted you. You got another one?
Yep. The Historic District Commission would like to reappoint Victoria Lehman, John Brennan, Sharon Best, Henry Ronke, and Timothy Buckley.
Okay, I have a motion, second by Counselor Noon. Clerk, please call the roll. If there's no discussion.
Counselor Galanese,
Aye.
Counselor Burrow,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
Counselor Noon, Mayor Valentino.
Aye.
Motion carried.
The Recreation Advisory Board would like to appoint Allison Cozen and reappoint Lowell Dewey.
Motion.
Can we
Second
do
by
them
Coun-
both together, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second by Counselor Noon. Any discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Galanese,
Aye.
Counselor Burrow,
Aye.
Counselor Peeler,
Aye.
Counselor Regan,
Aye.
Counselor Camera,
Aye.
Counselor Salamandra,
Aye.
Counselor Brim,
Aye.
Counselor Noon, Mayor Valentino.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Any more?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, we're gonna move on to council reports and we'll start with Counselor Galanese and I'm gonna bounce back and forth.
The Police Advisory Board met in February and continues to discuss the potential benefits of proactive and preventative approaches to policing in Geneva, including responses to mental health crisis, violence, interruption, and wellness checks. They are preparing a report on this subject to share with council by late spring. During the March meeting, Comptroller Newcomb will lead a workshop for the Police Budget Advisory Board on the city budget process. The Police Budget Advisory Board is also looking forward to the appointment of a seventh member and a new alternate member to the board. Interested residents can apply on the city website. Yeah, we definitely need some applicants. And I also want to bring this up that is not in my council report, but it has to do with boards and commissions that myself, Ken, and this council appreciates everyone on all the boards and commissions. And there is a whole list that will be posted on the city website with multiple boards that are needing volunteers to fill those boards. Some of the boards are really pressing to get members on them as we don't have enough for even a quorum. So we're thankful for you and anyone that wants to partake and volunteer for a good cause, look at our city website and see the openings that we have and apply within. Let me get to the planning board met in February. I have that. And they approved or they had an application for 82, I believe, I don't have it in front of me, 82 Exchange Street. It's or is it the OEO
Yeah.
site?
South Exchange.
Right. And
Great
we'll be
to
doing
hear.
it again in March.
Counselor Noon. Thank you. Yeah, we should almost ask them for their input on the zoning update. Counselor Brim.
So I wasn't able to attend this month's meeting for the Housing Authority, but one thing I do want to note is that for the UPK program for the school district, registration did open up as of today. And that's available online.
Can you explain what's that? What is that?
The UPK program, so it's the universal preschool
Okay.
for 3 and 4 year olds.
Thank you. Counselor Burrow.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't go to the Red Cross blood drive board meeting that they had because I'm not on that board. But of course, I want to tell you that the Red Cross is always looking for blood. And locally, you have 3 opportunities to donate this month, right here in the city of Geneva. Friday, March 24th at the Geneva General Hospital from 10 to 3. Wednesday, March 29th at the Presbyterian Church from 2 to 7. And Thursday, March 30th at FLCC from 1 to 6 p.m. The Geneva BID, I'll read a little bit from the report that will be given to us tomorrow. Our February meeting was postponed due to the weather, so I'll look forward to seeing Amy tomorrow at 7:30. But the Winter Arts Festival, the Art Walk had 16 locations participating this year, and the feedback from the downtown merchants was that it was the busiest retail day since before the holiday and one of the busiest days for traffic ever. The Welcome Center logged 250 visitors the first hour and 1,200 people for the day, which is almost as many people that visit the visitor center for the entire month of February. The Geneva Downtown Film Festival was also a huge success. There were about 150 people that attended the event at the Smith to view the international and local short films. They've already had inquiries for next year, and the BID put a big shout out thanks to Hobart and William Smith for helping to organize that event. The annual meeting for the BID is March the 28th, and historically there hasn't been a huge attendance from the city for that meeting from city councilors. So I'm encouraging all of us to attend March 28th at Bella's. It starts at 5:30. We have some award presentations. There'll be a small auction, and you can get the report on the Geneva BID, which is the organization that you agree to fund actually the most every year, reducing the city's labor expense. So I encourage all of you to attend that meeting. You can get tickets at the BID office or phone in your reservation. In the next day or two, there'll actually be a link if you want to make your reservation online.
5:30?
It's at 5:30, and then we start dinner at about 6 o'clock or 6:30. Tickets are $45. Surf and turf, yes. So you can call Dick Austin with your special request, and he'll cook it the way you like your lobster. The Shade Tree Committee, I attended their meeting on February 16th, as did fellow Councilor Camera there. They are planning Arbor Day 2023, which will have 100 free trees again this year with as long as you live in the city of Geneva. That'll actually be 100% funded by the firewood sales for the same committee. There's the group has 3 openings on their quote board. So if you know of people that love to talk about trees, please have them contact Jim Norwalk, who is the head. But as Ken often likes to say, it is a very intense committee and people love their trees and the city's support. I want to really give a shout out to Mark Perry, who's back with us and is so active and informational with this topic, as well as Joe Venuti, who there's a new focus and emphasis on the value of trees in the city of Geneva, there was a maintenance program that had been dormant for many, many years due to budget reasons. So Joe is oftentimes thanking us at the meeting thanking city council at the meeting for putting tree maintenance in the budget. It's hugely important to a community. Let's see, I talked about Arbor Day, and the next level of enthusiasm that was brought up, which I found so intense, is that the group is looking at actually grafting their own trees to develop some hybrid trees that can be planted under utility lines that will not grow to a point where they get in the way of services. So the experiment station, of course, has people up there that do that and can help us with buying the rootstock and then also grafting our own trees to put in our own nursery, which I find just incredibly exciting. The Shade Tree Committee of Jim Oswald, Jim Norwalk, Augie Norwalk, and Jim Engel. Last month, we provided the labor and $650 worth of firewood sales, which I am turning over to you for this month. So anyway,
Great.
that's where we are.
Cool.
That is, thank you. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Counselor Salamandra?
I don't have a report.
Okay. Counselor Peeler?
Thank you. I'd like to start out with extending a thank you to Mr. Mayor for allowing me to do the welcome at the Geneva Fire Department training session that I believe was February 17th or 18th. It's a couple weeks ago, yeah. And it was a great privilege and honor, and I stayed for some of the trainings, and it was great. I want to also extend a thank you to the people that came and offered their expertise to our community and the other regional firefighters. It was a great event. It was well attended. Downtown was packed. The Recreation Board met last month, and the discussions were about pickleball. That seems to be a topic. So, and a couple of members are meeting, if not this week or next, with some officials at the Geneva City School System. And they're going to be talking about possibly repurposing some unused tennis courts for community pickleball. And I believe there was a cost associated with that, estimated to be about 40 grand. So they're going to kind of bounce that around. I hope the Geneva School System possibly could pay for that. That'd be great. One of the things that was also talked about was the community feedback for the programs that the rec center offers for essentially childcare, what they call their spring break program and their summer program, where Geneva's youth goes to the rec department currently right now only from about 8 o'clock to noon for a half day, and does activities while their parents aren't their parents are working. And they don't really have the funding of the staff to do full day events, but they want to. So the discussion was how we're gonna pay for that if the community has provided feedback that they would like it. I would like to see personally a partnership with the Geneva School System with their summer school program to get students to the rec department and get out there and get active. I believe we have the bandwidth to do that. And I'd like to see more partnerships with the Geneva City School System to help our youth, especially during the time of the summer and during breaks. Let's see here. Some of the things that are upcoming are a new program called Geneva Breathes, which is a yoga program, and they are expanding that. And there's going to be, I don't know when Peace Week was going to be happening. Peace Week was, when, so they were going to partner with the Smith Opera House, the Geneva Breathes yoga program, and provide some yoga classes for residents during then. Some updates from the rec department include the Easter egg hunt, which will be April 1st at the rec center, 9 a.m. for kids under 3 and under, and 10 a.m. for kids 4 to 9. The summer youth program signups begin March 6th, and those age brackets are 5 to 8 and tots 3 to 4. Recently, the rec center hosted all of the North Street classes for ice skating. The kids bussed over there and did some ice skating, and then that was very successful. And I know that my 2 children enjoyed it thoroughly. Spring break rec, the program that I was just talking about with like the summer program, they also have the spring break program. Those signups open up April, although they're currently open, and those signups are for the week of April 3rd through April 7th, but the signups are open now. And again, that program is from 8:15 to 12 p.m., ages 5 to 12. Jana, you asked a question a meeting or two ago about Silver Sneakers participation, and the numbers that I received were a little over 60 participating seniors are in that program. So that has, I believe that was what they were targeted for. So they're glad that they got those numbers. Anybody interested in rec programs, please contact the rec department at 315-789-5005. That is their number, and that's the best place to participate in these programs, just a phone call. The next rec board meeting will be March 15th at 5:30 p.m. and that will be a hybrid meeting. You can attend via Zoom or in person at the rec department. And that is the end of my report. Thank you.
Counselor Cameron. They don't, they're not going at the speeds that they had their accident in Ohio at, but there still have been in the past leaks or things like that that we've had to respond to. I believe even our own fire departments had to respond to some situations. So those are things that I would like us to ask about. One of the other things they do is they spray along their right of way 3 or 4 times a year. And that's been observed by a number of people, including myself. They spray the right of way. Of course, the right of way is right along the lake. And so it's apropos that we ask them, what do they spray? What's their program work? How's it work and everything else, so that we understand that and that they have to respond. Now, one of the things that I did provide as an exhibit, and I just want to mention one thing, is the letter that the governor of Pennsylvania sent to Norfolk Southern, which asked a lot of questions, but there were some key words in the letter, which I think would be some things that we can use as well. The Norfolk Southern crews at the scene in responding to the accident separated themselves from the rest of incident management. 2, they failed to notify state and local response people. And his overall conclusion was, how do you respond to your improper response planning? So what I'd like us to do is do that. And I think that what we should have at minimum are telephone numbers and cell numbers and everything else, so that if something happens, we have that information and they can communicate with us and us with them. And the other thing is, I think it would be if we've got exotics coming into that rail yard there and might have to respond to a leak or something like that, that's going to involve our fire department. I think we should make a request and we should ask them to help fund some of our hazmat equipment and everything else. And they should do that as a matter of courtesy, because we're going to be the first responders. So that's pretty much, I hope we can do that. I know you write good letters and your staff will do that. And it was impressive, the CCs that were at the bottom of the governor's letter. And I'd like us to CC everybody and his brother on this letter, because I think it's really important. Councilor Regan.
Thank you. Thank you for that initiative to Councilor Camera. So let's see here. I was really happy to hear tonight talk about a work session, which I found to be a really productive way for us to be together in a less formal setting to talk through issues. I had asked many times for a sidewalk, to address the sidewalk issues that come up all the time regarding how to replace them in the city. And I finally met myself with Amy and Neil last week. I have done this before, but this time to just sort of pound out a few ideas. And it's something that it's a very frustrating, like many of these things, there's a lot of issues to take into account. Some of them financial, but it is something we talked about again, kind of the whole incentive thing, applying some sort of an incentive, but also sticking. So we're sure that some of this is taken care of, sticking to, kind of what's going on now, but laying over it. It's something that will have to come up before the budget next year, because it would involve some budgetary help. But just so you know that the discussion hasn't died, that is going on. One thing I also want to mention that I brought up there, speaking of trees, I got a lot of calls about a week or two, about a month or maybe even more ago. And then I looked out my own window and I had the same problem where trees were taken down without residents being told in advance. And as someone who had a tree that I loved in my front yard for 40 years, it's kind of hard to wake up and see it disappear. I don't argue at all with the fact that these trees need to come down. And I appreciate very much that the city takes that on, and that tree maintenance does seem to be such a priority now. And I know they were delayed, and all of a sudden there was a wave of these. But I would just encourage the city or the shade tree somehow to be sure people are aware that their trees are on that list, even if it's just on a place on the website, so that you can refer people to it or whatever, because it's kind of heartbreaking to see that tree, that's been out my bedroom window all this time, not there anymore. But so that's kind of a sidelight. In terms of the Green Committee, they continue to meet, and their work is really revolving around the Mission Zero event, which is going to take place at the rink, at the rec center on April 22nd. That is Earth Day. And that should be bringing in quite a few booths and so forth to address sustainability types of issues, and some fun stuff too. I know they're talking about having tours of the solar home and, kind of interesting things to bring people out. So that's something to look for, and something the Green Committee is working hard on. And then finally, I just want to say the 125th celebrations are unfolding absolutely beautifully. In that we've already had 5 events. If you go down to the Dove Block, you can see people painting pretty much all the time, filling in that mural, and it will be unveiled on Friday, this coming Friday, which is, we're also making First Friday with a lot of help from Geneva Community Projects. There'll be musicians in at least 10 of the 10 places downtown. A release has been sent to the Finger Lakes Times where those would be listed. And I think if you look around, like on city website and so forth, you can see it. But you can also just come downtown and walk around and you'll run into these places. The Cobweb game, which is an 1898 parlor game, is being played. 125 prizes have been secured, and they're in beautiful little gift bags. So come out and do that. That's a great family thing, but also just for adults who want to come down. That's all Friday night. I thank Pat for raising last night, which was a sold out event. Sold out, not that people had to pay for it, but that it was standing room only, at Geneva on the Lake, where Evan Dawson spoke. And he really was quite, what was the term he used? Geneva defies expectations, which sounds like sort of a double-edged sword, but at the same time, basically what he's saying is it's a great place. And, there's a lot happening here, and he had a lot to say that was quite uplifting, as was pointed out earlier. So that was a wonderful event. I do wish, you guys could have been there for that. But your opportunity is yet to come with Saturday, because that's really the culmination. And I hope to see all my fellow counselors there. We have a lot of past city councilors coming to that. And the whole program is very interesting and entertaining. The biggest feature will be the screening of a documentary called Geneva Then and Now, comparing things that went on in 1898 to the current day. And it's very well done. A lot of volunteering went into it, but it is about as professional as you can get. It was produced by the college's Center for Media and Society. So come out, see it. Give a nod to all your counselors and fellow or past counselors, and see some dance and music, and Geneva trivia game as well will take place. And then right after that, the Welcome Center has quite a nice reception, birthday cake, and then fireworks. And then we can all just say, happy birthday, Geneva, together. Yeah, that's all Saturday night. Yeah.
When does Friday night's activity start?
5 o'clock. Most of the music doesn't start till about 6:30.
At the
But
Dove Block?
the Dove Block, 5 o'clock is the reveal of the big mural, and also the beginning of the cobweb game. 5:30 there will be live music. Jazz group will be playing, so that will help you keep your pace in the cobweb game.
Jan, when do they stop the painting?
Right, it's unveiled at 5.
I know, but can you maybe go in the morning and paint?
Well, they're only open in the afternoons, so 12 to.
So I
even
might be
6
able to get a
sometimes.
brush on a,
Yeah.
okay,
and
good.
you
Gotta
can
bring a
come-
hairdryer.
Come for just a minute or two, come for an hour.
wet.
There's been little kids doing it, groups. Today I was down there and there was a whole bunch of people, students from the colleges, which I wasn't expecting to see. They were architecture students and they just wanted to come down. And so it's been a nice mix of people, and it's getting done, but your help would add to the progress. So get down there.
Jen, I want to further support your event with a request or possible warning to the city manager. There's supposed to be a big snowstorm for Friday night. So I don't know if that's going to put the kibosh on the event, or we can get some snow clearing in that area for people so it's safe and they're able to access the event properly.
Yeah, Friday night is like pretty much wandering downtown. Saturday.
Snowshoes, cross country.
Yeah. Saturday, we have alerted DPW, who is willing to help, to be sure that Long Pier is accessible to the fireworks department. We don't, right now, there's no plan to not have them go off. They're beyond Long Pier. If for some reason they need to, not appear because it's too difficult for them, we would just reschedule, because we have a whole year to celebrate. So I guess that's really what I have to say. I hope to see everybody out on Saturday, because that's the big drum roll moment. Thank you.
Great. We're looking forward to it.
Thank you.
We got public comment.
So I got a quick one. I want to give a big thanks to Karen Osborne, our city historian. She has resigned from her position, so we wish her well in her future endeavors. And she's given a great recommendation. So tonight I would like to appoint Becky Chapin, who's our archivist for the historic Geneva. So Becky will be our new city historian. I also want to give a big shout out to the Hobart hockey team. I thought Council Bro was going to steal some thunder here, but this Saturday night they play in the championship game right here in Geneva at 7 p.m. And it's for the NEHC title, Division III NEHC title. It's just a huge achievement, and we're wishing them well. Go Bart. We hope they'll come home with a win. It'll be great.
Yeah, we just hope we can time the fireworks for a big goal.
There you go.
They score and then the fireworks go off. There you go. Yeah.
Public comment is last. I believe we have a person in the back would like to speak. Just state your name and we'll give you a few minutes.
I'm Dr. Joanne Canavo. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. And thanks to any veterans and first responders in the room for your service. I just want to mention, I've been trying to relocate and grew up in the Buffalo area and had never been to the Finger Lakes. So when I came to Geneva, I really loved it and kept coming back, and ran into I guess the housing issue, if for lack of a better word. And I know I could live anywhere in town or country or city or country in city or town in Geneva, but I kind of like South Main Street, and a couple of row houses came up for sale, and I found they were bought by someone else at the same time I was trying to buy them, and they were turning them into Airbnbs. So I guess I would wonder what the goal is. I mean, it's more of a figurative question, but when you think about what the goal is, and community was discussed, that's what many people want, community and a sense of continuity and consistency with the people that you're among every day, unless you really want a very small town, which this is not, and that's good. But you don't really get that when there's so much turnover and so many people coming in and out, and just a sense of that you don't really have a neighborhood of your neighbors because they're short-term folks, and that can be good to a limit. And so, like I said, South Main is an extreme example perhaps, but if you want to live there, it's comprised of Airbnb folks, students, and apparently professors and some other homeowners. But, and it's lovely. I mean, this is a lovely place. It really is. I think also about, as a college professor and mental health therapist of over 20 years myself, I know that one of the things that, and many of you probably know as well, one of the things that attracts college students today is what their housing situation is going to be. And if you don't provide it for them, they'll go out and find it. And in Buffalo, we have something called Collegiate Village, which is just, you turn into its own little village of condos. And does it need its own security? Probably. But if you give them something that's attractive to them and it's their own, they're not going to maybe need to go live in the regular neighborhoods. Not that there's anything wrong with the students. I mean, I love the college students, but it's interesting, and they offer shuttles that go from Collegiate Village to the different colleges and universities. So it really serves a few different colleges and universities. So that's nice. And I was thinking about what we were talking about, building revenue. And as an outsider coming in, yes, am I used to Buffalo? Yes. So at the same time, you like to find things that are open longer than 9 o'clock at night. And there are some great places here, and you just wish they were open longer. Anyway, so.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, I know. Thank you. And
Thank you for your
thank you all
comments.
for what you do. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn, Counselor Noon, second by Counselor Galanese. All in favor?
All right.
Any opposed?